Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about what if Deku faced the horrors of the zombie apocalypse. If you guys enjoy this movie, comment down below and let me know before I start. Please do support for more awesome content. And leave a like, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel, and also share this video with your friends and check out the description in my playlist. The author of the story 𝐀𝐦 from AO3. So let's start the video. Deku Zombie O Chapter Text Day 1. Katsuki wakes up to the imminent feeling of wrongness. A discomfort so profound he awakens up from his sleep, sweating, shaking, a scream on the cusp of his tongue he swallows, a deeply hidden away animalistic urge clawing its way out of him. Instincts honed over millennia of evolution geared towards self-preservation telling him to keep quiet and not give away his surroundings. He stills. In the utter silence of his suburban home, he hears it. Panting, Katsuki just brushes it off. It must just be his parents. God knows what they're doing. He turns around and covers his ears with his pillows, pulling his blanket up till the silence lulls him back to rest. Except that before he can let the comforting arms of sleep claim him, a single thought pierces through his mind, dispelling the fog and making everything else come to a halt. The realization slams into him, making his breathing, his mind, and even his heart stutter, time itself compressing into a single point so that his sleep-addled mind has enough time to process what this meant for him. His parents aren't home. They weren't supposed to be, until at least tomorrow. And yet the soft sounds of steps followed by light, ominous panting are deafening in what he can only describe as the loudest silence of his life. Adrenaline kicks in before any second thoughts have time to, and he jumps out of bed, landing with a near-silent thud as the added padding of his carpet cushions any sound from escaping. Looking around for any weapon to defend himself with, his heart nearly palpitates out of his chest before he scans his limited edition Yagi Toshinori signed baseball bat mounted to his left. Normally he wouldn't even entertain dirtying his prized possession. But desperate times. Grabbing it, he felt the weight in both hands, letting it ground him for a second before he bound over, stationing himself behind the door. Now, the dumb thing to do here would be to walk out, bat in front, calling out to whoever was there to either come out or go away. And while Katsuki might not have been cool-headed enough to call or, rather, text the police, he still knew not to give his tactical advantage away first. This wasn't the first time his house had been intruded into. Mildly wealthy-looking house in a quiet, near-desolate suburban area. Of fucking course people had gotten in to rob them before. His rage at the situation escalated, remembering a similar incident just 4 months prior, where they had taken Yagi Toshinori's old cap. He'd given it to him himself during one of their training sessions. It was priceless. The person had stolen other expensive objects, but motherfucker, really? So yeah, this wasn't the first time he had been robbed, but it was the first time it had happened with him still in the house, and he wasn't chicken shit. Bat at the ready, he focused, centering himself, a coiled spring ready to jump at any second. As he strained his ears for any clues, his anticipation and, despite himself, his apprehension grew. The intruder was slowly coming up the hall. As a professional sportsman, he knew the tells of a body. The slow gait at which the other walked either denoted injury or calmness, maybe sure of himself in his solitude, as even he had been not even just 5 minutes ago. Both of these were to his advantage, though, so he wouldn't complain. The steps seemed heavy, probably belonging to a man similar in size and stature, though he couldn't be sure. The safest direction to take this would just be trusting his instincts. At the first sign of forehead, he would wing. So Katsuki waited, metal baseball bat gripped tightly despite the cold sweat running down his whole body. Hands clammy and slippery with perspiration forcing him to dry them on his pajama pants every 3 seconds. He stood like that for what seemed to be an eternity, stance and swing at the ready, waiting with bated breath for the intruder to cross the line. The soft patter of the footsteps started approaching even closer, even stepping on that one wooden creaky floorboard that drove his mother crazy, signifying they were already 2/3 down the hall. As they got closer and closer, every step seemed to counterintuitively get quieter and quieter, though that might have just been the blood rushing to his ears with the rhythm of his adrenaline-crazed heartbeat. The first foot, the left one, entered through the doorway, and just like that, something in him snapped. All the previous doubts and anxieties melted away, mind complete and utterly concentrating on the one singular task. His muscles strained, tightening, his body falling into typical habit, his arms tense, his grip tightens, and his knees bend just slightly. In that moment, he is the one in control. The second foot crosses, and Katsuki's eyes sharpen, like his very being is a razor-sharp edge ready to cut down anything in his way. The person finally enters, and Katsuki swings. He swings like he does when practicing. He swings like he does when there's a million people cheering him on. And he swings like he does when he is aiming for a ball instead of a head. And of course, because he is the Bakugo Katsuki, one of the youngest professional baseball players to debut at just the age of 16 and the blasting bomber, the hit connects without any issues. The problem, and what he could not expect, is what happens after. What should have been a hard, unpliable, normal human body was instead soft, yielding flesh, the anticipated thud being instead replaced by a sickening visceral squelch. Hot, smoggy liquid squirts and splatters everywhere, and his shock is too big to possibly prepare and prevent him from getting it everywhere. It is on his face, his hair, his eyes, and his mouth. Time itself stops, and he feels suspended, almost inanimate. In the dead silence of the night, the gentle moonlight enters through his window, painting his room a pearly silver. But not even the tender touch of the stars can disguise what has just happened. What the fuck? He rasps out, voice barely above a whisper. He doesn't quite understand it yet, at least. Not fully. But the implication is there. And his body seems to have caught on much sooner than his mind has. If the way his stomach churns is any indication, bile and nausea forming, rapidly trying to find its way out. His bat starts trembling. All of a sudden. Or, no, that's not quite right. He's the one who is trembling, isn't he? He drops the murder weapon baseball bat and stumbles to the light switch, nearly tripping on the dead body's intruder's leg. He needs to see what he's done. He just needs to. When he turns the lights on, he takes one steadying breath before turning around to face what he's done. In front of him lies a dead body. There's just no way around it. The mangled mess of flesh he can only surmise used to be the head lays still. The walls of the cranium are completely smashed in. Skin, bone, and brain matter practically indistinguishable from one another. He doesn't understand how that is possible. He just killed someone. What was merely supposed to be a disorienting hit to give himself time to run away has instead turned into a full-blown murder. He can say goodbye to everything now. His future, his job, his family, and quite possibly his freedom. Even as an accident, involuntary manslaughter is still a very serious crime. And for his career as a semi-public figure, a death sentence. Before he could sink even deeper into his thoughts, he is pulled out of them by a spine-chilling, wet, slimy sensation. When he looks down, he sees some sort of tar-black liquid has oozed out of the wounds, forming a puddle of who knows what at his feet. His stomach drops, and the previously under control bile and nausea are threatening to come out once again. Retching, his breath catches in his throat, and his chest starts heaving. His pulse starts pounding in his ears as he tries to force a shaky breath in, realizing he is in the beginnings of a panic attack. No, he fumbles to his nightstand, where his phone was charging, holding it up with trembling hands. He would call 110 and turn himself in. That was the best course of action, he thought, for once seeking a lifeline and authority. With unsteady fingers, he unlocks the phone, shakily dialing the number. The phone rang for what felt like eternity. An eternity of confusion, anger, pain, and heart-wrenching guilt. Still, no one picks up. The rest of the night devolves into what feels like the worst day of his life. He has tried calling countless numbers, from the police, to the ambulance, to the firefighters, to his family, yet not a single one has answered. He understands why his parents wouldn't. It's nighttime in Russia and they always turn their phones off during the night, but the police. It's been an hour of trying to contact authorities just for complete radio silence. The dead body must be rapidly cooling and the stains on his walls, floorboards, carpet, and even him have long since started drying. They will be a pain to clean up once they dry off completely. A dry, almost nonchalant part of him muses. The part that landed on his eyelids has already started coagulating and crusting up, making blinking difficult. The place has started smelling incredibly foul. A hot, acrid smell burning his eyes and nostrils, and he doesn't know if it's just the room or also him. With the way the strange substance seems to be coating every inch of his body, feeling grimy and dirty all over. He doesn't want to touch it, in fear of being condemned for tampering with evidence, so he has basically just been soaking in mysterious body fluids for who knows how long. He feels disgusting, and all he wants is for this to be over with. The better half of an hour has been spent on rejected phone calls, a barrage of unread texts to emergency services, and a lot of crying, heaving, retching, and vomiting. After all that, he's just tired. Eyes involuntarily closing, he rubs them. Fuck, he exclaims, the black tar substance stinging his eyes. His throat is sore from coughing up all that bile. His eyes are puffy from the tears. His mouth tastes horrible because he can't seem to even drink water without vomiting again. He smells like literal shit, and now his eye is probably going to get goddamn infected from whatever the hell this is. Wasn't brain matter supposed to be gray in the first place? His musings are suddenly and violently interrupted by the noise of shrill sirens coming from his phone and the streets all around him. The Japanese national alarm system coming to life to inform its unsuspecting citizens of the event that will shape this century and the rest of humanity with one eerily calm message: attention, citizens. This is an emergency alert. Please stay indoors and lock all doors and windows. Do not venture outside. I repeat, do not venture outside and stay indoors. If you are already outside, seek refuge in the nearest secure location. Do not engage with any suspicious or erratic individuals. Reports confirm the outbreak of an unknown contagion causing individuals to exhibit aggressive and violent behavior. Exercise extreme caution. Emergency services are overwhelmed. Await further instructions. I repeat, stay indoors. This is not a drill. We will get back at you very soon. What the fuck? But before he could wrap his mind around it, his phone starts ringing again. Old hag appearing in bold italics. He picks it up, but before he could even open his mouth, he froze, hearing his mother sob for what was, quite possibly, the first time in his life. "Katsuki," she wailed. "Are you okay? We were sleeping when we got the national alert and, oh God, when I checked the phone I'd seen you had tried calling me so many times even though you never call and you know we keep our phone on silent and Mom." He interrupted. He didn't like seeing her cry. It didn't fit her at all. "I'm fine." He heard sniffles and some shuffling before the calming voice of his father reached his ears, which said a lot. His father was always the most emotional out of the three, having his mother be the one to ground him. In the rare occasions where it was his mother that lost it, however, it would be his father the one who stepped up to be her rock and center. The last time this happened had been when Aunt Mako had died, though, so this spoke of a deep level of distress he didn't want to think about. "You worried us a lot. Please just text us next time, son." He sighed, and though he sounded exasperated, the relief was also clear in his voice. A relief that wouldn't last, if they knew. If they knew he had killed a man. A muffled damn fucking straight was heard in the background, his mother apparently having calmed down enough already to insult him right after. So, his father continued, "Why did you call us? When we saw the zombie outbreak from that hospital just a few streets away from our neighborhood, you don't know how worried it made us." Wait, Katsuki stopped, fingers pinching the bridge of his nose because what do you mean zombie outbreak? Am I fucking asleep? Language his father reproached, more out of habit than any actual intention of correcting him. That boat had long sailed. "Did you not see? While we watched the Russian National Alert intermission, your auntie called, worried sick. She said she saw the video trending on social media. Here, let me send you a link." His phone chimed with a notification, and opening his messenger app he clicked the link his father sent him, taking him to a video titled "Real Life Zombie Outbreak, Misutafu Japan What?" Hitting play, he watched as a random street interviewer suddenly turned pale amongst the shrill screams of the masses. The camera panned over to where he was looking, where apparently a body had fallen out of the 5th-story window, splattering on the sidewalk amongst littered shards of glass. Horrified, the people ran away from his scene, taking their children and elderly to a distance they considered safe. "Oh God, we're gonna have to cut that out. Were they fucking serious? Wait, no, we could sell this to the press instead. Oh my God. Oh wait, that's actually a great idea. There is no actual way." Instead of using common fucking sense, the two idiots got closer to the dead body, zooming in on the features. With the camera getting nearer, Katsuki realized that the person lying on the ground seemed to be seeping that same tar black liquid from their lips the man he had killed intruder had. "Damn, what is that? Who knows? You think the hospital is doing anything shady?" the annoying interviewer asked, brows furrowing. Was it finally growing a conscience? "Don't get ahead of yourself. We are not investigative journalists for a reason." The cameraman responded, clearly shooting all following questions down. Yeah, because you're too scared of not playing it safe." But before the cameraman could even respond, the body started convulsing, spewing a dark black mist that seemed to stain everything that same pitch black color. "Ew, what the heck?" The interviewer took some steps back, covering his mouth with his hands. "We should get away from that thing. I'm getting a bad feeling." The cameraman zoomed into the convulsing body once more, but ultimately agreed. "Yeah, let's get out of here." As they briskly walked away, the camera caught various shots of curious people slowly getting closer to the mysterious body. Being sensible, for once, they walked to the car, instead discussing their theories as to what that could have been. Maybe they're doing weird-ass experiments on them. "You know, this hospital actually has quite a few famous ghost stories, right?" Yeah, the other side, clearly exasperated. "I told you to drop it." The camera shook, opening the car doors and getting into the seats. Too much movement for the probably cheap stabilizer to keep up with. The interviewer stuck his tongue out like a child, driving them out of the parking lot while the cameraman still filmed. "We could be like the Japanese Dan and Phil." Wait, stop a second. The cameraman's previous nonchalant attitude flipped, suddenly turning worried. The car stopped, and the camera focused once more on the hospital and the loads of people congregated around the body. Multiple murmurs and gasps were heard as the body got up. Surviving falling such heights wasn't completely unheard of, but it was incredibly rare. "Wait, shit, you're actually seeing this, right?" The camera zoomed in once more on the body. Person, the crowd surrounding them amazed. 4 paramedics came out of the building with a stretcher to help the victim up, except that when one of them leaned down to read their pulse, they lunged. They sunk their teeth into the paramedic's neck and ripped out half of it, blood spraying from the peeking jugular veins onto everyone around, bathing everyone in a deep carmine. "Holy shit, holy fucking shit," he shouted, voice cracking into an octave higher, his calm facade melting away completely. Shouldn't we call the police?" the interviewer asked, hesitant, camera still recording what was happening before them. "Yeah, dude, probably. You do that." Most of the people had run away, rightfully frightened, but some had stayed behind to try and stop the bleeding while getting bitten and scratched at in turn. The scene was so bloody 𝐬𝐻 didn't understand how the video had managed to stay up for so long. Right. But before the police could answer, the paramedic with half a neck missing started spasming, slowly getting up and attacking the other paramedics that had tried to staunch his bleeding. Other similar victims that should have been by all accounts done for started standing or crawling up, biting, teething, and clawing at everyone around. "You know what? Never mind. I'll call the police. You drive us the hell away from here." "But the video," the suicidal interviewer argued. "Fuck the video, man. We need to go." Apprehension in his voice, the video cut there. "Well, shit. The video was dated to yesterday, posted just 10 hours ago at 4 in the afternoon. Most of the older comments were calling it a well-edited indie horror short, with the uploader defending the verity of it as if their lives depended on it. As the hours progressed, you could see the comments start coming around, calling it plausible. These last 2 hours were full of people adding their own experience, linking other videos and articles proving the truth of it. If this was a prank, it was a very well-executed one. 𝐬𝐻 himself would have probably written it off as a joke if the scene hadn't seemed that familiar. Not just for the slow dragging body or the suspicious black substance leaking from their mouths, but most glaringly, obviously, the hideous neon green shirt one of the people trying to help the bleeding medic had been sporting. The very same loud bright green the rotting body in his room sported. And he wasn't saying this lightly, if this really was a zombie. This changed everything. The guilt that had been eating him alive dispelled just like that. And it felt like the first winds of spring. Like the first breath you take after resurfacing from the ocean. But on the other hand, 𝐬𝐻, his father inquired, having been waiting on the other side of the line for him to see the video before responding. He wasn't sure what to say. He didn't even know what he wanted to say. He was emotionally stunted enough in everyday situations. You couldn't expect him to function normally here. "Are you guys safe?" he rasps out, worry quickly taking a hold. His parents are not that young anymore. His dad has that knee injury that always acts up in the worst moments, and the old hag wouldn't last long without him. Where were they? They had mentioned an 𝗏𝗏, but 𝐬𝐻, his dad, interjected, calm. The same voice he took on with his mother when she went on a tangent. "We're fine. The Russian government has reacted pretty quickly to the news. They've entered a state of emergency, so everything is on lockdown at the moment. We're pretty lucky. There have been 0 casualties in our city so far. But that's part of what we wanted to tell you. Until this virus passes, we aren't going back anytime soon, kiddo." His father sounded apologetic, and he could hear his mother cursing up a storm in the background. "That's fine. I can handle myself. That's what I wanted to tell you, actually." His tongue felt heavy and dry on his mouth. One of them entered through the garden, and he stopped, taking a steadying breath. This would be the first time he actually said it aloud. "I killed one of them. Oh, 𝐬𝐻." But whatever he was going to say was suddenly cut off when his mother took over the phone once again. "Good. You listen to me. You have to do whatever it is to survive. Got it? Those are not people. Lock up and count your supplies. Inform yourself of the situation as much as you can. I'm sure everything will turn out fine, but we need to prepare for the worst. We live in the outskirts, but 𝐬𝐻 still has a pretty dense population. Stay on top of things. You've got this." Her voice sounds strange when she says this, like the one she uses to give him pep talks before a big game, yet not. "And 𝐬𝐻," she says, in a voice she would call tentative coming from anyone else. "Yes, we love you." His tongue knots and seems to want to choke him. He can't say what they want to hear, so he settles for the next best thing. "I know. You guys take care, too. I'll see you soon," and hangs up. The rest of the day or night really is spent exactly as his mother told him to. He barricades his house not before throwing the dead body out, finally, and gives himself a well-needed shower. He knows he should probably rest some, and that he's only running on fumes, but he is restless with unending energy and no other way to spend it, so he powers through it. All the doors and windows are locked shut properly. This time, and all his food supplies accounted for. Stretching it out, he is confident he could survive on it for up to 3 weeks, give and take. He reads multiple articles and watches numerous videos. The TV constantly on at all times for the latest breaking news. Here's what he learns from it. The official name for the zombies the government had given out was reanimated biological hazards, but literally no one was calling it that. Zombie movies were still a real thing in this universe, so most of the populace was semi-familiar with what to expect. The ones that weren't were probably watching every zombie blockbuster right about now. So zombies it stayed. Some people had had encounters with zombies, but unlike him, it had been long enough for them to observe some key characteristics. What they gathered was that they were generally slow and blind, which they made up for with a good hearing. They had no sense of touch, and nothing would kill them or at the very least finish killing them except for a direct shot at the head, something Katsuki was immensely grateful for. The unknown virus rotted the person from the inside out. Your brain would quickly turn to mush, and your skull would debilitate soon after, as if you'd left it in vinegar for a while. The surrounding flesh would then blister, turn soft and loosen. Like the movies showcased, once one was bitten they would turn. What people didn't know yet was if other injuries like a scratch did the same thing. No one has any actual idea where it comes from. There are theories, of course, but no real consensus. The time it takes to turn varies from person to person and situation to situation. Zombies were essentially violent, dumb humans. They were practically harmless as long as you weren't an idiot about it. The Japanese president gave a virtual press conference assuaging the people's worries. Things were completely under control soon, but they would need its people to stay home for that to work. Most services would be suspended, but they'd distribute food to all homes each month, as well as take over other private sector jobs essential to life. Satisfied, he turned the TV off, shutting all the lights in preparation to sleep. It's 6 a.m. and he hears the birds chirping, a part of him glad they at least can live life as normal, though surely his will resume so shortly enough. They just need to wait for the bodies to completely rot over and everything will be back to normal. Back in bed, he settles underneath the covers, back to where everything started. Faint light has already started seeping in from between the metal binds. Closing his eyes, he is sure that after the stressful day he has, sleep will claim him soon enough. He tosses and turns back and forth, trying to find a position relaxing enough to maybe ease his inhibitions and distress, yet sleep still eludes him. Getting up to get a cup of linden tea, a wave of nausea hits him out of nowhere. Shit, he would have to take some ibuprofen with that. He stalks back down the hall to brew himself a cup. After consuming the medication and the infusion, he made one last round around the house to make sure everything was locked in. After the last time they'd been robbed, they fortified the whole house just in case. He must have left the door to the garden open, because there's just no way a person, much less a zombie, would have been able to get it. He liked to think he was always precise and methodic with his actions, but apparently not. Coming home dead tired from an extensive long winding game against the Portugal national team didn't excuse anything. So now, paranoid, he had made sure everything worked as it should about 5 different times before even considering sleep. After he finished, he rinsed the cup and filled it with water, taking it back to his nightstand. With that, finally, he slept. He wakes up abruptly, the feeling of wrongness there once again, a palpable presence in the room he can reach out at any time and touch. Having learned to trust his instincts, he lurches forward, bat already next to him and at the ready. The house is silent. His mind is sluggish, and his body feels like it's being weighed down by a full-on commercial airplane. Still, he forces himself to get up and look around. There's nothing there. He goes back to sleep. He wakes up again, this time in a cold sweat. Perspiration is running along his whole body and his sheets start feeling damp in certain places. Again, still, he gets up, slow but steady. Once again, there's nothing there. He goes back to sleep. He wakes up, shivering. His cold sweat has drenched the bed and he thinks he's coming down with a cold. The ibuprofen he'd taken earlier doing little for the nausea that had come back tenfold. Shaking, he reaches for the cup of water and takes it in his trembling hands. But his grip is weak and the muscles spasm without his consent. The mug falls to the floor and shatters. He will clean it later, he decides. He goes back to sleep. He wakes up. His mouth tastes like cardboard, and his tongue is dry and sandpaper rough. His small closed-off room feels stifling. The air thick and cloying with the scent of blood and viscera scrubbed clean with antiseptic. The bleach has killed off any possible bacteria, but the smell still lingers, like an angry ghost haunting its place of rest. He swallows, but his throat feels arid and scratchy. Tasting blood, he really needs water but can't gather enough strength to even entertain getting up for it. Like this, he keeps waking up and falling asleep continuously for an unknown stretch of time. Sometimes the nausea wins, and he sees himself run to the bathroom and puke out all he ate and more. Sometimes, he feels so queasy he can't even muster up the strength to go to the bathroom to empty his powers. Sometimes, when he does have the strength to get there, he doesn't have the strength to come back. Figures he would spend the first days of the apocalypse puking and shitting his guts out. The last rational part of his mind thinks. Time blurs, fades, dims, and unfocuses. It's all a haze of motions and feelings he can't quite make out or distinguish from one another. All he knows is that he feels bone-tired. His hair is sticking to his forehead, his mouth feels continuously patched, and his throat is unquenchable. He is so hungry. It is in one of these episodes that he hears it. The telltale sign of his door opening in soft, almost delicate footsteps. He should run for his bat. But half delirious, he can't even move. He is resting on the cold tiles of the bathroom as cold sweat beads on his nape, gliding down his face till it reaches the hair sticking to his forehead. The taste of bile is still lingering from his latest spew. His body is made out of lead, but that doesn't seem to matter since the brain needed to make commands is stuffed with cotton. He is tired, and he wants to do his rest before his mind shuts down completely. He hears the footsteps get closer and closer. Through blurry eyes, he sees a vaguely familiar figure peering down. Weird. He feels like he should be angry, but he doesn't have the strength to. He closes his eyes once more and sleeps. When they were younger, 𝐻𝐻𝐿 got a dog. It was cute, with fluffy brown fur and big brown eyes. 𝐻𝐻𝐿 had begged for days to have it after he saw it in the window of a little pet store. It wasn't long before the dog started spending more time in the backyard. It would whine at their back door, scratching at the glass in hopes someone would come. They never did, and eventually the thing gave up. Instead, it would bark incessantly at the fence between their homes, begging Izuku for attention only to snap at his finger through the gaps in the fence. The dog caught him a few times, clenching its teeth around his small fingers till skin broke, and blood stained its nose red. His mom bandaged his fingers the first time, kissing his hand and drying the tears that spilled down his face. That day wasn't special to him, not yet. He stayed away from the dog after that, flinching as it raced to the fence when he entered the yard. He stopped going out as it became more desperate, rattling the fence with its need to reach him. The dog started barking when he wasn't outside too, yowling up to his window. Then he was diagnosed as quirkless. His mother cried, as he had months before. He tried to comfort her, dry her tears. His parents argued for a long time after that. He would sit in the backyard, poking his fingers through the fence every time they got loud enough to hear through the doors. They ran out of bandages the day his father left. His mom got another job after that, needing to make up for the money his father wasn't providing anymore. They couldn't afford a babysitter, but that was okay, because his mother said he was a big boy now and he could take care of himself. It was better than it seemed, really. He could watch all the villain fights he wanted, even on the big TV, and his mom wasn't around to say no when 𝐻𝐻𝐿 asked if he wanted to play in the woods. He got hungry sometimes though, just a little. When night shifts ran into opening shifts, and it was just too easy to sleep at the hotel near her jobs another day this week. The fridge was empty more times than not, but that was okay. Izuku loved his mother. One day 𝐻𝐻𝐿 dared him to eat a worm. It was after school, raining lightly as they walked. 𝐻𝐻𝐿 had been teasing him all day for his stomach rumbling, and the pathetic creature had emerged to breathe. Got scooped up into burning hands, held up into the air. It was slimy and fat, writhing mindlessly as it smeared mud along 𝐻𝐻𝐿's knuckles. Izuku hated it. Gravel crunched in his teeth as it went down, cold in a way that made him gag. But 𝐻𝐻𝐿 smiled at him as he did it. He hadn't felt hunger in months. Just an empty pit sat in the base of his gut, but that night he did. Laid awake in his bed, listening to the dog howl and staring at the stars instead of the smile that rested just beneath his eyelid. There was a little anthill in his backyard. It popped up along with the flowers spring brought, piled up with the sandy dirt. He watched the lines of ants crawling back and forth as he listened to the faint sounds of laughter carried in by the wind. They bit at his legs when he sat too close, swarming angrily at his feet. They stung his tongue. He stuck his fingers through the fence again, the ants crawling onto the dog as it bit. They went to the river that summer, something he hadn't been invited to in months. 𝐻𝐻𝐿 had shown up at his back door, face red from the sweltering heat, and demanded he go with them. He was happy to follow behind, happy enough he could ignore the fingers twisted around his friend's eye, the edge of a palm curved on his cheek. It was hot out after all. His 𝐻𝐻𝐿 was in the river, more red dripping from his mouth, and he stumbled up to his feet. His hand slapped away before the offer could even really be considered, and he was left again. 𝐻𝐻𝐿 storming away into the forest, the others trailing behind nervously. He watched the cloud of red slowly drift away as well, pulled by the shallow current rushing over the rocks. A spot of white was left behind, a tooth. That night was cool, dew collecting in the grass where he sat. He heard the dog breathing softly from where his back rested against the fence, scratching lazily at the dirt below it, hot and wet where it panted in the little gap under the fence. He offered his prize from the day to the beast. It took the thing, sniffing before it curiously chewed, spitting it back out onto the dirt when its little teeth couldn't break it. Izuku smiled before taking it back, tipping his head back and swallowing it whole. It was from his 𝐻𝐻𝐿 after all time passed, as it always does. 𝐻𝐻𝐿 invited him to the woods again, something he hadn't done since that day in elementary school when they all learned their place in this world. His friends snickered from their place behind him, a cruel mouth twisting to bare its teeth around a cigarette, but Izuku agreed anyway. He would follow 𝐻𝐻𝐿 everywhere, after all. They went to the river. 𝐻𝐻𝐿 caught him a minnow, presenting it to him, with the same smile he had all those years ago. He swallowed it whole, choking as it squirmed in his throat. Drool dripped down his chin as his breath caught, trapped in his chest along with the little fish. The laughter around him dimmed as he heaved, his ears roaring until he felt a thud against his back. The minnow lay still struggling in a pool of pale yellow bile. The laughter returned, buzzy with the slowly fading hum of TV static in his ears. They left him, wandering down the river to find a new game as he still stood gasping. The minnow had stopped struggling a while back, but his teeth still ripped its head from the little thing's still body. Blood flowed out from the gaps in his teeth, mixing with the long dried spit as it dripped into his palms. He liked the color. They'll be graduating soon. 𝐻𝐿 will get into UA, because of course he will. And 𝐬𝐬 doesn't know where he'll go. Standing on the roof of some building, left by his hero with nothing but shattered dreams. He stood there for a long while, swallowing around the sticky feeling of sludge until he heard it. He'd know the explosions his 𝐻𝐿 makes anywhere. He stood panting at the scene, sweat from his panicked sprint only growing worse with the heat from the continued blast. 𝐻𝐿 was afraid he could see it on his face, in the short raspy breaths he took before the sludge once again covered his face, the tears streaming from his eyes. Fuck, he was jealous. That was his 𝐻𝐿 being consumed in that filthy slime. A villain unaware of who he was getting to hold like that, of who he was treating like some expendable life. Who was he to do this, to be so close to his 𝐻𝐿, to laugh so arrogantly as he snuffed their life out without second thought? How dare he? 𝐻𝐿 was his, he is mine. No one else should get to touch him. He is mine. He is mine. He's 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 all might came. He blasted the slime away, and the police took 𝐻𝐿 away for medical care. 𝐬𝐬 couldn't sleep that night. He was just so hungry. He wandered down to the kitchen. His mother had stocked the fridge before she left again. He ate a bowl of rice, some noodles, leftovers from dinner, a box of cereal, some frozen sandwiches, still cold. His stomach ached. He was hungry, no, he was starving, the feeling stabbing through his chest and choking its way up his throat. Thick drool spilled from his lips, nauseous from the force of his need. He grabbed a bottle of ketchup. Sauce packets. Desperation seized through him as he swept through the rows of food left in the fridge. His stomach bulging out, he was starving. He was going to die. He just couldn't take it anymore. He had to. There was scratching at his back door. The dog had burrowed under their fence, escaping into their yard. He smiled as he opened the door. 𝐻𝐿 passed the O exam. A short month later and he would be leaving him to be a hero. The boy got everything he wanted, and yet he still couldn't shut up about his fucking dog running away. He never even named the thing. The dog came back in the end, the night just before 𝐻𝐿 would start at UA. It had been so long, but there he was, whining pathetically at a back door that had never opened for him. And then it opened, and his 𝐻𝐿 was smiling at him. The cacophony of teenage voices rattled around the metal walls of the bus 𝐬𝐬 sat on. Class 1 was on a 3-day trip into Tokyo to attend the Hero Awards in person. The teachers had decided that it was important to learn how to hold oneself as a hero outside of the day-to-day activities, which included attending award shows such as this. UE Academy was fortunate to be extended an invitation, and the first years were extra lucky to be invited. It was usually an invitation for just the third-year class of the hero course, but given the circumstances of the year, the public board decided to extend the invitation to the soon-to-be heroes who have experienced so much of the hero world already. The drive was relatively short given how close the school already was to Tokyo, but having attended a full day of classes, 𝐬𝐬's eyes were heavy with fatigue. He sat in a row with Todoroki on his right, against the window, and occasionally leaned forward to add to the conversation with Ida and Uraraka, who were sitting in front of them. He scanned the bus, taking in the varying stages of sleepiness that his classmates were in when his eyes settled on a particular blonde whose head rested against the window and his earbuds in. 𝐬𝐬 watched his unwavering gaze at the world outside the bus flying by and sighed to himself. It was that unwavering strength that drew 𝐬𝐬 in. Bakugo Katsuki was like the sun to him, something captivating, bright, and always pulling him in. In just the short while they've been at UE, their entire relationship has changed. When 𝐬𝐬 got into UE, he was initially excited. He'd be able to pursue his dream and watch 𝐻𝐿 reach his, too. But then Katsuki just got worse. 𝐬𝐬 had hoped that eventually they could figure it out. But as time went on and as more life-changing events happened, 𝐻𝐿 just got too far from him. All of the animosity and resentment that had been building up for years finally crashed onto the two of them like a tidal wave. Katsuki found his own friends and 𝐬𝐬 had his. Of course, the two of them would always know in the back of their minds that there will always be something connecting them. But at this point, it wasn't necessary. And 𝐬𝐬 missed him. He had since they turned 6. 𝐬𝐬 looked away from Katsuki and settled in for the last 30 minutes of their drive as the sun set in the western sky. They were supposed to be staying at a hotel with the rest of the hero course for the 2 nights they were in Tokyo and would be there soon enough. To say it was chaotic trying to get everyone into their hotel rooms was an understatement. 𝐬𝐬 could only watch as the lobby grew exponentially louder as the UE hero course entered it. Each class was still grouped up and Class 1B was closest to the door. "Ada, please keep the class together," was all Mr. Aizawa said before leaving to the front counter, meeting with Principal Nezu and Vlad King. Unfortunately for Ida, that was the perfect moment for Monomanito from Class B to start provoking Class A. Isn't it weird how Class 1A is supposed to be better, but they arrived late, even though we left the school at the same time? Monoma laughed from afar. Class A mostly found the problem with that train of thought but didn't engage. Mostly, we weren't the ones driving, idiot. Yeah, how would we have any control over when we got here or not? Everyone, please, ignore him. We're awaiting Mr. Aizawa to return with our room keys. Let us conduct ourselves as the heroes we hope to be. Ida pleaded with his classmates. There was a little grumbling among them, but Izuku saw them ignore Monoma's attempts at provocation. Aizawa soon returned with a stack of folded card holders. All right, each set has the room number written on the front. There are only 2, so if you lose yours, you sleep in the hallway. I'm going to give room assignments now, so listen up. He spoke at a normal volume and classes circled around him to be able to hear. Ida and Todoroki. He handed Ida the card set. Shiro and Kaminari. Jiru and Yaorazu. Sato and Kuda. Shoji and Takoyami. Iraraka and Asui. Aoyama and Mainta. Ajiro and Kirishima. Mina and Hagakure. Midoriya and Bakugo. Horror filled Izuku's veins as he realized what that meant. Tail, switch with me. It seemed Katsuki's voice reached nobody's ears except Izuku's. Tomorrow's schedule is as follows, Aizawa said, drawing everyone's attention back. We will leave from the hotel at 10 a.m. You will be in your pairs to shadow a hero for the event, so you will need to take your clothes for the ceremony with you when you leave. Tomorrow morning, I will give you your assigned hero. I recommend you all go to sleep soon so that you are well rested. With that, Aizawa left the students to find their rooms. Izuku turned to Ida with an idea on the tip of his tongue. I'm sorry, Midoriya, but I cannot bend the rules. It would be irresponsible and tarnish the role as the class representative. Ida stated before Izuku could say anything. You don't know what I was going to say. Izuku protested. You were going to ask if you could just stay with Todoroki and I, and while I understand and would love to have you, unfortunately, we are in pairs for safety reasons and therefore cannot allow Katsuki to be alone. Ida explained. Izuku melted, acknowledging the logic behind it. Fine, that's fair, Izuku said, defeatedly. He grabbed his bag and followed behind Ida and Todoroki to their floor. The years spent apart from Katsuki had allowed him time to process why he was so drawn in by the blonde. In that time, he learned there was probably a level of infatuation, whether romantic or not. Ultimately, Izuku decided that it had to have been true, as his level of awe towards Katsuki felt different than his awe towards All Might. While he admired them both for their strength and their ability to win no matter the situation, there was an added feeling when he thought about Katsuki. This was going to make sharing a room with the boy really difficult. When they arrived at their floor, Katsuki was already in the hallway, glowering at Kirishima as the redhead left him, entering his own room. Izuku was so desperate to just get to sleep and avoid Katsuki that he held his room key before he reached the cream-colored door. He was conscious of Katsuki heading his way and shoved the keycard into the door. What do you think you're doing, Deku? Katsuki called as Izuku stepped into the room. I should be first. His voice trailed off as he saw the room's interior. The floor had the hotel's patterned carpet, except for the white tile in the bathroom, and the curtains were a deep gray, but that wasn't what caused him to stop his train of thought. No, the issue sat in the center of the room. A single queen bed took up a majority of the room with a dark brown headboard and pristine white sheets adorning it. What the hell? Katsuki muttered. This has to be a mistake. Izuku lowered his head, a sour look coming to his face, and he spoke. I can sleep on the floor, it's not that big of a deal, he said. Instead, he heard the sound of padded footsteps behind him walking away and just rolled his eyes. First night of 2, this was fine. He'd be fine. Izuku began to pull out his dress clothes for the ceremony tomorrow and hung up his shirt and tie. It wasn't long before Katsuki returned. By then, Izuku had already pulled out the extra bedding from the closet to lay on the floor and arrange his bedding how he wanted it. He tried to ignore Katsuki as the other boy glared at the bedding on the floor and spoke. Aizawa already fell asleep. We'll just have to deal with it tonight, he spit out, noticing the bedding on the floor. What the hell is this? I said I'd sleep on the floor, but you walked away, Izuku stated, stopping in the bathroom doorway. What the hell? Katsuki asked, again. Izuku closed his eyes to retain what small amount of patience he had and spoke again. Kaken, it's late and everything is already set up. I'm changing and going to bed. You don't get to just decide without talking to me about it. Why does it matter to you? Izuku whipped around to face him. Because I decided I'd sleep on the floor. Katsuki's hand started smoking as Izuku showed a hint of anger. Izuku felt his own power surge in his irritation. It is already decided, Izuku hissed, before Katsuki could say anything further. There were 2 thumps on the wall behind Katsuki signaling they were being too loud. Izuku's power subsided. I've already set it up to my liking, Kaken, he almost pleaded. Katsuki rolled his eyes and left the room, door slamming behind him causing more thumps to come from the other room. Izuku sighed again, deciding to just throw the whole plan away and go to bed. Whatever, stupid 𝐀𝐭 can sleep on the floor. I don't care, he thought, sliding in between the hotel's white sheets. Before he could think about anything else, his mind started being lost to sleep. It was nearly pitch black when Izuku's eyes opened again. A fraction of light snuck into the room from behind the hotel's curtains from neon signs outside. In front of him was a face he'd grown as familiar with as his own. Bakuagu's eyes were closed and his chest rose and fell in his sleep. In the first 20 seconds he was awake. Izuku was startled. Then, as he remembered what had happened, he calmed down. He was unsure why Katsuki decided to share the bed with him, but given how cold the room was compared to the warmth of the blanket, Izuku connected the dots. The last time he slept this close to Katsuki, they were 5 years old and had both gotten tuckered out playing heroes. Izuku stayed the night at his house and they fought even then about where Izuku was going to sleep. Katsuki insisted he slept with him so they were together, but Izuku wanted to make sure Katsuki had the space he needed. After all, Izuku wasn't going anywhere. At least, that's what they both thought at the time. Katsuki had fallen asleep first, and Izuku used that time to admire the other boy's hands. They were so awesome to him. The pores that allowed the blonde to use his quirk were still fresh on his palms and Izuku wanted to know everything about them. By the time he fell asleep, he held one of Katsuki's hands in his. They had another sleepover when they were 12, and Izuku was still so enamored with him. 𝐴 had to go on an emergency trip to see her mother, so Mitsuki agreed to keep Izuku for the night, much to Katsuki's dismay. Again, they fought over where Izuku was going to sleep. Katsuki wanted him out of his room. Mitsuki insisted he stayed. Eventually, Izuku just pretended to fall asleep at the foot of Katsuki's bed. When the blonde finally fell asleep, Izuku watched his face, remembering all the snarls from the previous day and wondering when the smiles had changed to sneers. Now, though, Izuku watched Katsuki sleep again. This time he traced the curve of his lips and the shape of his nose. Izuku felt like he stole something he shouldn't have, but it also felt right, something normal. Once again, he wondered why their relationship fell apart and if there was something he could do to change it. He also let himself dream for a moment of a world where Katsuki felt the same way about Izuku. A world where Katsuki felt the same gravitational pull and inspiration that Izuku gets from him and returned the feeling. Izuku had decided already that it would always be a dream, a fantasy, and nothing more, so why was he feeling the familiar sting of tears? "You're staring." Katsuki's voice rang out, rough with sleep. Izuku's eyes widened, ice flooding his chest in fear. He said nothing because, really, what could he say? Izuku shot up, trying to find something to say, but he found nothing still. Katsuki moved slower than him and sat up, reaching to turn on the lamp. In the light, Izuku felt more panicked and his words found him again. "I'm sorry, 𝐀𝐭, I wasn't meaning to. Something had woken me up and I was startled to see you and then I got distracted wondering why you were in the bed." Izuku trailed off, his heart still racing and his cheeks starting to heat up. Katsuki only watched him, his expression betraying nothing. Izuku wanted this interaction to end. "I'm gonna go back to sleep," Izuku said, starting to get out of the bed. Katsuki stopped him. "Wait, no," he said. Izuku froze in surprise. We were fine," Katsuki said quietly, in an attempt to explain. Izuku stayed still, like a prey animal caught in the gaze of its predator. "I thought." Katsuki trailed off. "𝐀𝐭," Izuku whispered back. Katsuki cursed. "I didn't like the idea of sharing a room in case it happened again." Katsuki began to explain. "Every time we're forced to be together or work together, you're obviously uncomfortable and we end up fighting. I didn't want it to happen this time, but..." Izuku's mouth parted in surprise. 𝐀𝐭 was trying to be civil. "I didn't mean to start a fight," Katsuki said. That was basically an apology in Izuku's book. "Thank you," Izuku responded quietly. He felt like he owed Katsuki an explanation now. "I was uncertain because I didn't want to upset you. I feel like you still hate me. I stopped hating you when we moved into the dorms," Katsuki stated, matter of fact. "Actually, before that." Izuku tilted his head. "I stopped hating you when you started keeping those stupid notebooks." "Well, I didn't know it, but I did. I actually admired it," Katsuki explained. "I was just afraid of being not enough, I guess." Katsuki started to become agitated again, so Izuku started to speak. "You have always been enough, at least, to me." Katsuki's mouth closes. Izuku noticed him starting to shut down again. "What I mean is, you're the reason I kept pushing so hard. I know I've told you so much already, but, 𝐀𝐭, you're so inspiring. No matter what, no matter how much I wanted to ignore you and pull away and leave when you told me to leave, I couldn't. You always pull me in." Izuku finished, losing his breath. "Even after everything I did to you?" Katsuki asked. "Especially after." "Well, after. Like, after I knew you regretted it and after you kinda apologized in your own way after our fight." Izuku looked into Katsuki's eyes and started to fully realize what they were talking about. "I was afraid that if I said anything, you'd refuse me." Katsuki whispered. After everything I did to you, I was so afraid. Silence filled the room as Katsuki considered his next words and Izuku debated if he should speak again or not. I've liked you for a long time. Katsuki finally spilled out. I realized it after what I said to you in middle school. I realized that if you followed through, I'd be devastated and wouldn't be able to live with myself. I never said anything because how the hell could you ever like me back? Even if you did, you wouldn't deserve me. What makes you think you can decide that yourself? Izuku spat out, righteous anger flaring up inside him on Katsuki's behalf. I didn't run from you because I like you, too. I never turned away from you, no matter how hard you tried to push me away. I always come back and you think you can decide what's best for me. The fact you think so little of my taste makes me livid, Bakugo. Katsuki gasped at Izuku using his family name. That only ever happened in important situations, ones where something needed to be impressed upon him. I don't give a damn if you think I deserve you. I think I do, and in that situation, the only person's whose opinion matters is my own. Izuku finished. He took a breath to settle his frustration before continuing. If this is real, if this is something we both want, we have a lot to work through. I'm willing to try. I want to try if you do too. But only if you really mean it. I don't want to be toyed with. Katsuki sat for a moment and considered everything that's been said. He could speak up and they can try, something Katsuki's wanted for years, or he can stay quiet and let Izuku go find someone more deserving of him. But alas, Katsuki had always been selfish, doing what he could to get everything he wanted, no matter the detriment to others. I want to, he said. Izuku nodded and began moving around the bed. He pulled his pillows from the top of the bed and propped them up behind his back, then pulled the blanket from the floor so he could wrap it around him. Then, let's start talking. Clear and open, right now, so we can start again, this time on better terms, Izuku said after he was situated. The two stayed up, reminiscing about their shared childhood experiences, how those memories made them feel and where their lives became intertwined, knotted and unknotted all at once. Come sunrise, they felt like entirely different people than the two that had walked into the hotel less than 12 hours before. They felt sturdier, like they could rely on each other again, and one day, perhaps, their lives could feel like the water of a lake. Occasionally ripples would come, but overall they would be stable and consistent. The reality was that most of the blame lay with Denki, although it must be clarified that not all. It started out like a typical Monday morning. His friends were busy with the mountain of homework that the teachers left them in their first week. Something had to do with the event that would be announced in a few days, and no one seemed to have time for anything. The point was that, as busy as they were, the group of friends had a quick breakfast and dispersed to his classes, leaving Kaminari alone and bored, which forced him to go to his first class earlier than he usually did. For the first time in 5 years, Kaminari Denki arrived on time for a class. Congratulations. That should have been a sign that this was definitely not going to be a good day, right? However, as the multiple incidents that the gang calling themselves the Baka Squad had gotten into in recent years had shown, Denki was clueless and ignored all the signs that fate sent him. Wow, is this the day there will be another magical war? Monoma said from his place, raising his voice loud enough for everyone to hear. Denki grimaced and glanced at the other Slytherin who was standing very close to Professor Aizawa's table. Some of his classmates laughed and others simply decided to go back to what they did before and ignore them. The fights between the two blondes were a daily occurrence, although never so early in the morning. Denki walked calmly to his seat with a smile to show that the other's words didn't bother him in the slightest. I have decided that today I want to be a good student, he answered, stopping at his table and seeing a book on his tablemate's seat. A shiver ran through his arms. Yes, he had forgotten his class book, Feigning Insanity. He sat as if nothing had happened. Is that a crime? No, but a miracle. The teacher's flat and expressionless voice echoed against the stone walls. All the students jumped in their places and immediately stood up, leaving everything they were doing to see their teacher in the middle of the room. Kaminari shuddered as those listless eyes stopped on him. Although I doubt that this miracle is due to his own decision but more to that of third parties. The blonde smiled timidly, without denying it. So, open his book to page 40, we are reviewing. Denki tuned out after the first few words, his fingers tapping the table lightly so as not to disturb. His companion slid next to him and opened the book, placing it in the middle so they could both read. Denki gave him a smile and thanks, and his eyes stopped on the indicated paragraphs. He had to do it about 4 times until they made some sense, and by the time he could understand what the other boy was supposed to do, he already had all of them. The gathered materials. He didn't want to be a bother, so he offered to start the preparation while the other went to get the material that the teacher offered for that particular class. His eyes wandered at some point because, when he returned his attention to what he was doing, the potion was a burgundy color and not a soft sky blue like the book said. In his panic, he decided to place a drop of dragon blood in an attempt to fix it. Without success, -5 points for Slytherin. Aizawa recited like every day he saw Denki. because there was no time in which the blonde didn't do something that would leave him with less points for his house. The blonde sighed, feeling the gazes of the rest of the Slytherins burning on the back of his neck. The rest of the class passed in relative calm. The students successfully made their potions, and Denki received help from his classmate to remake his, this time without being distracted. Near the end, Monoma seemed upset after seeing Professor Aizawa praise the result of Denki's potion. That was the first warning sign. The second came in the form of Monoma bumping Denki's shoulder with his own, even when there was plenty of room to pass. Denki was gathering his illegible notes, and the crash caused a paper to slip from his hands. He frowned, ready to face the boy, but the memory of rushing to get a spot next to his friend Zero in the next class stopped him. He hurriedly picked up the paper, crumpling it in the process, turned and left the room in quick steps, moving expertly through the people when it happened. Don't you really get tired of being the cause of Slytherin losing points all the time? The tone Monoma used was irritating, and Denki couldn't help but stop to face him face to face. He mentally sent an apology to Zero for falling for the provocation. The boy was at the entrance to the living room, his back leaning against the stone wall and his arms crossed over his chest. That irritating, headache-inducing smug smile was making an appearance. Denki rolled his eyes. He returned the points when I made the potion right because yes, Professor Aizawa was pleased to see how he followed his classmates' instructions. And he even had that strange look when he almost confused the vials because I swear to me these are similar in color. He seemed to be in deep thought about something, like the rest of his teachers, not that he thought much of it. I wonder. Monoma walked away from the wall, taking steps towards Denki. It was like seeing a predator stalking his prey. Why do they always give you special treatment? The students leaving were beginning to stop to watch the confrontation that was unfolding. It's funny how you and your entire group always escape punishment after breaking so many rules. Anyone else would have already been expelled. Maybe we're just impressive. You're not. Denki leaned over Monoma when they were facing each other, trying to match his height, which seemed to irritate the other. Monoma laughed. Blatant favoritism bothers me. Is it because your father is an _? Denki tensed up at the mere mention of his family. It set off red alarms in his head. A mediocre one, by the way, when he couldn't even catch his wife, and left all of his companions to die. His son was not far behind. The murmurs began at the Slytherins' bold words. There was no way anyone knew Denki's family history. It was the news of the year, and when his last name was called on house selection day there were uneasy murmurs. It didn't escalate any further. No one was interested in it. Denki foolishly believed that he could continue like this for the rest of his school life. An idiot who excels at nothing and pathetically fails every spell he casts. No one would believe that he is a descendant of such great magicians. People began to look at Denki with pity. On the other hand, he felt his face heat up from embarrassment. The correct option would be to stop Monoma and leave at once. It could be the gossip of the week that would be abandoned too soon, unlike what was about to happen. Anyone who didn't know Denki would say that the boy didn't belong in the Slytherin house. Always smiling, bubbly and a little clumsy personality, that goofy and joking appearance, strong voice, jokes up his sleeve, outgoing. People murmured how it was possible that a person like that ended up in that house. He was a Hufflepuff or maybe a Gryffindor. They whispered, and 𝐀𝐦 always laughed, saying that it was bad to give labels. Plus his family came from a long line of Slytherins. He was just one more. I guess you still have enough power to get your son out of trouble while we, the righteous, have to take the punishments for you. However, people who really knew him could point out the qualities in Denki that put him in Slytherin. It bothers me so much. It bothers all of us actually. But we have to keep quiet because what would happen if we said something? Nothing, like the last 5 years. Denki was ambitious. They have to keep quiet and pretend that they like you. Something that I personally don't agree with. Denki knew how to be clever if the occasion called for it. Maybe they are also afraid of what might happen if they do something to that woman's son. Denki was determined to get what he wanted by any means necessary. That crazy woman who killed many Aurors, but left her husband alive and then escaped. And when he was upset, that woman who is said to continue caring for her beloved son from the shadows. Denki is cruel. The people gasped as Denki landed a blow on Monoma's nose. Drops of blood fell on the floor and Monoma covered his broken nose with his hand, surprised. Shut up, mudblood. He growled with such malice that no one could believe he was the same boy who every morning greeted whoever was in the great dining room. A petty thing like you has no right to mention anything about my family. You're just a mistake. You don't even belong in our house. The filter between his brain and his mouth was completely clogged. At this point Denki was just vomiting out all the words that he knew would hurt. Deep down he wanted to hurt Monoma, as much as his mother's betrayal hurt him. You are rubbish, a magician's joke. You think so much of yourself walking down the halls telling supposed truths about other people, but you're worthless, you're nothing, no matter how hard you try. It's sad. That voice, magnetic and beautiful that currently carried a hint of disappointment, made Denki freeze in place, the rest of the speech stuck in his throat. Using such an outdated and degrading insult when you have friends who may also come from Muggle parents, pathetic. Shinsu Hitoshi appeared in the crowd at some point, perhaps from the beginning if he took his words as an indication. His gaze seemed bored, but there was a certain glint of annoyance underneath. Denki took a step back when the purple-haired man approached to help Monoma, his best friend. He was shaking, his heart beating too fast against his chest as his brain worked again, becoming aware of what he had done, and said, "I had a better image of you, but I guess you're just like the rest of the purebloods." Those words hurt so much, Denki felt his eyes sting with the way Shinsu was seeing him, sad, disappointed, upset. The boy he had a crush on since third year was here, watching him act mean and intolerant. He heard him say terrible things, and worst of all, now he knew that Denki was a horrible person. Embarrassed by all the stares he had on him, he turned around and ran away. He could feel the sting on his knuckles that earlier impacted Monoma's face. He did not allow himself to cry, walking through the hallways that he knew by heart and managing to resist until a bathroom where he locked himself to finally explode. Tears fell in cascades. His body shook with each sob. He rubbed his hand against the blood on his knuckles, trying to remove it, but only managing to spread it further across his skin. The words spoken by Monoma and himself repeated over and over again, like a broken cassette. He was awful and immature the way he reacted. He lashed out at Monoma in an embarrassing way, and no matter how much he felt the other Slytherin deserved it, he still had to stop and think. He was better than that. His friends told him that he was better than Monoma. "I'm not, I'm worse," she sobbed, curling up on the floor, dissolving into tears. The day went incredibly slow and I had only passed the first class. It had been her fault, but not completely. Okay. Times Denki missed all classes following the incident and also skipped lunch even though his stomach felt like it was being twisted by an unknown entity. He stopped crying at some point, but the tremors in his body didn't stop, and from time to time he sniffed while staring at the dirty bathroom tiles. Around 5 in the afternoon he heard a series of footsteps entering, murmurs that definitely belonged to more than one person, and finally 4 pairs of shoes stopped in front of the cubicle where he was hiding. The door opened softly. 4 young men looked inside where Denki was sitting, hugging his knees and with his face red, wet with tears, his hair a mess from the constant pulling he gave it while he cried. He probably looked pathetic. Feeling tears pooling in his eyes again, Denki squeezed them shut. "I'm sorry, I'm so sorry," he recited urgently, as if he didn't the people in front would disappear. "I didn't mean that. Well, a little yes, but I shouldn't have used that word. Kaminari," Mina called, crouching down to his level. "Stop, we are not upset." A little, Zero admitted from behind, because they were friends, not liars. "But it must have made you very angry if you said that. The idiot deserved it. He would have done the same thing if he was there." "What?" Bakugo frowned at the look Kirishima gave him. "He's always trying to fight us, and now that he finally gets what he wanted he's going to cry to everyone. As if we didn't know what an idiot he is." "It wasn't the way to react," Kirishima said, punching Bakugo's arm ever so slightly, then walking towards Kaminari. "But we don't blame you either. Plus probably half of the things they say you said aren't even real. Do you want to tell us your side?" With Mina's warm arms around him and an environment of security that his friends provided him, Denki began to talk about what happened, from the moment he arrived early until he ran out of the place, ashamed of what he did. Mina whispered an "oh no" when she mentioned Shinsu, and she could see a grimace on Zero's face. Everyone knew about the huge crush she had on the purple-haired Gryffindor. "I really screwed up, didn't I?" he murmured disconsolately. Mina stroked her hair to adjust it while Kirishima leaned down to cup the blonde's face and force him to look at them. "You did it, man, but it's not all your fault." Monoma said some very hurtful things there. Kirishima wiped his thumbs across his cheeks so gently that Denki felt like he would cry again. "Besides, you know what you did wrong. You're probably already thinking about how to apologize, and if Shinsu doesn't change his opinion of you again because of that, then he's an idiot who's not worth it. Stop crying now, silly face." Bakugo crossed his arms, feigning annoyance. "Someone who is friends with that annoying shit doesn't even deserve to be cried to." Denki laughed, feeling all the tension in his body finally dissipate, leaving him in a calm, relaxed state. "I'm not crying just because Shinsu will probably never like me. Please, like you care about Monoma," Zero joked, ruffling his friend's hair despite Mina's complaints that he had already made it look somewhat decent. Denki laughed again. He didn't deny it, but he didn't affirm it either. He was quite cruel to Monoma, and even though he disliked him, no one deserved that treatment, not even his housemate. "Thanks guys, fuck. You're a horrible crybaby, don't do that again." Bakugo turned to leave. "What do you expect? Damn, it stinks in here. Next time pick a fucking place that doesn't smell like shit." With the help of Kirishima and Mina, Denki stood up and left the bathroom with his friends surrounding him like they were bodyguards. Walking through the hallways, a couple of people gave him judgmental glances, though they quickly looked away when Bakugo growled or Mina confronted them directly. When they entered the large dining room and stole all the attention, 괊𐻦 confirmed that, indeed, his fight had spread like fire throughout the school. He walked with his head down, shoulders tense from the light murmurs he heard around him despite the murderous looks Deku kept throwing at everyone. They sat at the Hufflepuff table, at one end to get away from much of the student body. 괊𻦦 was in the middle of Kirishima and Zyro, while Mina and Deku occupied the seats in front. His friends began to chat as if thousands of eyes weren't on them. Zyro handed him a plate full of food, saying that he hadn't seen him eat anything since the morning and he didn't want him to pass out. A few minutes later, Midoriya's group slid in next to him, much to Bakugo's annoyance, and joined in the chat, talking to 괊𻦦 as if everything that happened that morning had never happened. The Slytherin smiled a little and, as the minutes passed, he began to cheer up, being part of the conversation and devouring his plate because of the hunger he brought. Laughing, 괊𻦦 thought he had the best friends. Times it was 50 points less for Slytherin for hitting one student and another 50 points less for Slytherin for instigating another. Plus both 괊𻦦 and Monoma would have detention with Professor Aizawa to help him fix the potions room before their class, without being able to use magic. 괊𻦦 sighed for the 16th time since he began his task. He was covered in dust that made him sneeze every once in a while, and there were too many cobwebs for a place that apparently looked clean. He heard Monoma move behind him, diligently washing all the materials with some annoyance because Aizawa said that if 괊𻦦 approached them he would extend his punishment. It was well known how many materials perished easily in Kaminari's clumsy hands. Aware of the situation he was in, 괊𻦦 began to get restless. The place was deserted. Aizawa had made no sign of showing up after receiving them and disappearing through the entrance. Monoma was in his usual petty state and didn't try to fight him in the entire hour they had been alone. It was the best time to apologize. If Monoma didn't listen to him or ignored him, he could blame the noise of the water. He would have apologized, and that would be enough to leave his mind at peace. He could forget everything, or at least try. He took a breath, sneezing a second later from the dust. "Hey, Monoma," he called. There was no response. But he didn't care. "I'm sorry for what I said yesterday. You're a good wizard and you belong in Slytherin. Like, you really, really, really belong." He stressed the word 3 times to make her point clear. "You have all the qualities and I don't even think that's necessary." He shook his head from side to side when he realized he was getting off topic. "The point is, just because you're a Muggle-born doesn't mean anything. You're still a talented wizard and everyone knows it." The water continued to flow. Monoma showed no sign of hearing it or even acknowledging its presence. 괊𻦦 let out the breath he was holding and continued with his duties until Aizawa emerged from behind the stone wall that separated the place from the teacher's office with Shinsu behind him. At what moment they had entered and gone to the office without being noticed was quite a mystery. 괊𻦦 completely avoided seeing the Gryffindor and focused on leaving the utensils he used to clean to the side. Aizawa gave him the go-ahead and dismissed them for the day, pointing out that he would expect them at the same time tomorrow. 괊𻦦, tired, walked in silence with Monoma. Both were heading to the Slytherin dormitories in an uncomfortable atmosphere. The blonde could only be grateful that they were not so far from his destination. "Always, since the first year, you and your friends have escaped punishments, even expulsion. I don't understand. It bothers me why you are so special unlike the rest of us." 괊𻦦 stopped, looking over his shoulder at Monoma. "I'm really waiting for the moment when karma bites them in the ass. They deserve it. I don't accept your apology because I don't even care what you said. For me, the one who is worthless is you." Monoma frowned, stopping a step behind 괊𻦦, from where he had full view of the barely swollen nose he was sporting. "Even though I'm a pureblood, I'm better than you at anything. I'm really tired, if you're going to say something interesting." 괊𻦦 hissed, looking forward to his bed and a good nap before he had to go to his first class. "But I also apologize, but only for your mother's part. I shouldn't have mentioned her." Monoma looked like it pained him to say those words, as if he were forced to apologize. "The rest I stand by. No matter what he tells me, I hate you and that won't change." Monoma continued on, pushing him with his shoulder and leaving the other in the hallway. 괊𻦦 sighed. At least he had managed to apologize. Heavily, he walked into the common room and ignored everyone in favor of going to his room, falling into bed, and sleeping soundly. Bakugo was already there, sleeping like the good boy he was. 괊𻦦 laughed lightly, slipping into his sheets and covering himself completely. "Did you apologize?" Bakugo's hoarse voice startled him. The blonde was too away from screaming. "For Merlin's sake, don't do that again," he pleaded, a pout forming on his lips. Bakugo was still in the same position, even with his eyes closed. "If you care." "No, but I drew it." As 괊𻦦 smiled. Kirishima had probably asked Bakugo to ask. "Okay, you can tell Kirishima that I already apologized." Was what he got in response. Without any sign of an upcoming talk, 괊𻦦 settled back down, but Bakugo surprised him again when he spoke. "I didn't deserve it, I know, but I wanted to do it." They both went to sleep after that. They had classes to take in an hour. Times the news about the return of the Triwizard Tournament completely buried everything related to the fight between Monoma and 괊𻦦. People were more interested in the newcomers mingling with the Hogwarts students. Pale blue dresses and blood-red uniforms completely contrasted with the black capes and colorful ties. Normally, 𝐷𝐸 would be very excited about all the commotion going on. He would be the first to attempt a conversation with the 𝗏 students who sat at his table, and he might have reacted with a flirtatious smile to the strange look one of them gave him as the social butterfly that she was. It was a shame that the silent treatment Shinsu continued to give her since the fight erased any trace of happiness she might have had. The director began his speech by thanking all the guests for their presence, then spoke about what an honor it was to host the first tournament after so many years. 𝐷𝐸 wasn't really paying attention, his gaze occasionally moving to look for Shinsu only to be saddened when he found him listening to the director, just as he should. 𝐵𝑃𝑃𝑔 looked exasperated, but he didn't do anything, and 𝐷𝐸 knew he'd expect a lecture about how stupid he was being for craving attention from someone who didn't deserve it. It bothered him a little. Shinsu was an incredible person who fought hard to get rid of the rumors that surrounded him. 𝐷𝐸 saw him in one of his lowest moments crying in the astronomy tower. They spoke a couple of times, shared moments that 𝐷𝐸 kept very fondly close to his heart. Shinsu had an appealing personality if you knew him. He was smart, sarcastic, funny, he knew what to say, and overall, he deserved to be in Gryffindor, plus he was a saint. No one could have Monoma as a friend without being one. Not even 𝗵𝗄 could stand being with the guy, and 𝗵𝗄 was the embodiment of patience. So, having his friends say that Shinsu wasn't worth it frustrated and hurt him a little, because he believed that, of all people, Shinsu would at least try to talk to him, listen to his side, and not blindly believe in Monoma. Sighing, she looked back to the front where the headmaster was saying that only the 6th and 7th years would be able to participate, causing an uproar throughout the place. "Ah, that's a shame. It sounded like fun," he said with mock disappointment. He hoped that would serve to distract 𝐵𝑃𝑃𝑔's anger at him and his depressing state. "Didn't you hear anything they just said, you moron?" 𝐵𝑃𝑃𝑔 growled next to him with a frown. Sometimes he wondered if his friend was born with him. Despite his scolding, he was sure 𝐵𝑃𝑃𝑔 was also upset about not being able to participate. "It is not an event to have fun. It is dangerous and will challenge the best magicians in dangerous tests," 𝐷𝐸 nodded mentally. So that was what it was about. His friend loved a good fight to prove that he was number one. "Ah, your smile is terrifying, 𝐵𝑃𝑃𝑔. What the fuck did you call me?" Suddenly everyone began to applaud and the food appeared on the table. Both blondes had to stop their conversation, but not before 𝐵𝑃𝑃𝑔 sent a threatening look to 𝐷𝐸. Saved by food, the Slytherin thought. From behind, a violet gaze rested momentarily on him before turning away again. 𝐷𝐸 couldn't notice, too interested in the steaming meat served in front of him. "So what is your school like?" he asked the foreign student, a smile sliding across his face with ease, letting his extroverted side take over. The boy suddenly seemed delighted with the attention received as he began to tell all the peculiarities of his school. It turned out that the Durmstrang and Beauxbaton students were more sociable than they let on, the Ravenclaw table becoming just as rowdy as the rest for the first time in years, as the normally reserved students quickly engaged in chat with the new students like everyone else. The other tables. 𝐷𝐸 slowly felt that he forgot everything that was bothering him. The Durmstrang student sitting in front of him was funny and had a lot to share. Dinner passed so quickly that everyone looked disappointed when they were reminded that it was time to return to their rooms. 𝐷𝐸 said goodbye effusively to his new friend and told 𝐵𝑃𝑃𝑔 everything he learned about Durmstrang, as if 𝐵𝑃𝑃𝑔 had not been present throughout the conversation, much to the blonde's annoyance. When they entered his room, 𝐷𝐸 had already spoken 3 times more than in the last 2 days. "It's a shame they don't cancel classes too," 𝐷𝐸 lamented. Flopping onto the bed, he kicked his right shoe with his left foot to take it off and did the same to take off the other one. 𝐵𝑃𝑃𝑔 took his time changing, unlike his friend. "You're just looking for any excuse to miss class, idiot," he admonished, leaving his shoes properly arranged next to his bed. He looked at 𝐷𝐸, who had already covered himself with the sheet. His tie was sticking out of one side of the sheet and his socks were wrinkled. "Below, and organize your damn space. I'll make a mess tomorrow anyway," he complained. Covering his head with the blanket, he heard 𝐵𝑃𝑃𝑔 growl again. "And a little rest wouldn't hurt with everything that happened last year. I still have emotional scars and physical ones." 𝐷𝐸 still looked at the scar on her leg with fascination and fear. "Who knew I would meet a werewolf and have a battle with him? It was crazy. You had the whole fucking summer to rest." 𝐷𝐸 was going to object to the fact that he was under observation for half of his vacation, but the candles went out. He heard the others' sheets moving and then silence sealing the end of their conversation. "Good night," he whispered as quietly as he could and closed his eyes. He didn't know how long it was, but the noise in his brain didn't stop. He rolled over in bed and almost choked himself with his tie. Sleep was not close to coming, so he carefully got out of bed, bringing with him his sheet that he wrapped against his body, walked in silence towards the living room where he sat in one of the armchairs. The silence didn't help calm him down. On the contrary, it only made him more uneasy. The Slytherin common room had never been to his total liking. It was gloomy and cold most of the time. The emerald decorations didn't help the setting much, and the few portraits were scarier than anything. Frustrated, he put his feet up on the couch, hugged his knees, and rested his chin on them. Sometimes he got annoyed with himself for the way his brain didn't seem to know when to shut down. The days without sleep were more frequent lately. Sometimes it was just the nervous energy that enveloped him. Other times it was the memories of his destroyed family. Sometimes, rarely, was it about reviewing what he had seen that day in class or what he had done that day. Today, unfortunately, they were memories. Inevitably, the fight with Monoma came to him. Shinsu's words and his disappointed look made him shudder. It was almost 2 weeks since the event, and they still hadn't spoken. Should he be the first to approach? Although he wasn't sure what to say, or how to start a conversation without seeming awkward. He, annoyed, rubbed his face with both hands. His father said that one day his actions would give him a hard time. If only his mother were here, he thought. She always knew what to say. Even if it had been years and he was very young back then, he still remembered how wise she was. Her father said it was one of the reasons he fell in love with her, always so quick to advise and give help. Sometimes she wondered what they did wrong. What broke her so much to choose a monster over her family? She hasn't abandoned us. ____, his father told him that time he returned home after being interrogated for hours. He asked how he was sure, and all he got was, "I just know, I trust her." ____ wiped away the betrayal tears that fell down his cheeks. He wanted to believe in his mother as fervently as his father, but remembering that she was one of the culprits for Midoriya almost dying last year didn't help. "Go to bed, ____. ____ jumped in place, swallowing the scream he was going to let out with sheer force of will so as not to wake his companion. He stood up, clinging to a sheet, and looked behind the couch. It was empty. Confused, he took a few steps away to surround the couch just to be sure. He almost thought he heard Shinsu, but there was no one else there. "Now I also imagine things. It can't be," he murmured, rubbing his eyes with his free hand. He decided that this was the time to go back to bed and left. Behind him, a cat snuck through a door. Times the next morning brought with it a different bustle than usual. The classes invaded by new provisional students only added a new type of chaos. Students were excited and others irritated. The fights were not unexpected either, although they were quickly calmed down with a simple glance from the teachers. Denki, for his part, was delighted with his new classmates who knew nothing about his disastrous start to the year. It was easier to talk and get along, although there were still some who preferred to put up an imaginary barrier as soon as they heard his last name. "It's normal," Jiru said when he complained at lunch. "People are idiots. If they stay, it is because at least they can think for themselves. Stick to them." Denki smiled. "I knew I was winning your heart." The Hufflepuff gave him a blank expression. "The only thing you're getting is a blow if you keep worrying about stupid people." Again, ___. "We already talked about this. That idiot doesn't deserve a single thought, no matter how in love you are." Mina appeared next to her, hitting the blonde's leg to get him to move since Siro was also reaching out to them. "We're not talking about Shinsu," he complained. "I never said a name," Mina scoffed, and Denki stuck his tongue out at her. "Where are Bakugo and Kirishima?" he asked, and Siro, who kindly handed him his transfiguration notes without him having to beg, answered him. "I heard some guy from Bobaton say something about Kirishima and Bakugo was there. I feel sorry for the guy in Slytherin. You guys are probably out of contention for the House Cup right now." Everyone at the table grimaced. "It's not like there's much hope for us in any year." Denki took a piece of meat and put it in his mouth while trying to transfer all of Siro's notes to his own parchment. Everyone in Slytherin considered that they were paying a kind of karma when Bakugo fell into the house, together with Kaminari and one or another lower grade student. They became the reason why Slytherin continued without winning a single House Cup for 4 consecutive years. They were about to celebrate their 5th. "Oh, code purple coming in right now," Mina whispered in his ear. Denki swallowed and tried to look discreetly at the door. Shinsu was entering with Midoriya at his side. He seemed more tired than normal, his dark circles more prominent, and despite smiling there was a certain tension throughout his body. He wanted to run there, ask if he was okay, fill his bowl with food, and trick him into taking a 5-minute nap that was guaranteed to last an hour, even if Shinsu got upset. How pathetic it sounded. If Bakugo were here, he would already be screaming for even looking at the Gryffindor. Shinsu seemed to notice that they were watching him because his eyes traveled throughout the dining room until they stopped at Dink. Their eyes met and the blonde tried to smile in greeting, but all action stopped when Shinsu looked away from him and returned to focus on Midoriya as if I had never seen Denki. Oh, that hurt. His stomach tightened and suddenly all the desire to eat or do anything disappeared. He vaguely heard Mina curse Shinsu's name and Siro patted her leg to try to get her attention. Denki gathered enough courage to smile, pretending to be okay. "Stop it, guys, it's not a big deal." He gripped the pen more tightly, carelessly dipping the tip in the ink to continue with his notes. "I heard that by dinner they will have already placed the cup to register for the tournament." The change of topic took effect as Mina nodded vigorously, the palms of her hands hitting the table, almost knocking over the ink bottle. "We should go." Kirishima heard from Tetsu that some guys from our year are trying to use a potion to trick the cup and get their names in. 괊𐬭 gasped dramatically, drawing laughter from his friends. There's no way we're going to miss that. It'll blow up in their faces, you bet, Jiro added. Yes, and we will be there to see it live, Mina added. Look who's coming there. Troublemakers number 1. She screamed when she saw Bakugo and Kirishima enter. Her loud voice caught the attention of those who were in the dining room. Although they did not stop to see the show that the group of friends would put on, they were already used to it. As Bakugo started a fight with Mina and Kirishima tried to stop him without success, 괊𐭏 saw Shinsu again. The Gryffindor seemed to fight sleep instead. His head looked like it was going to hit the table at any moment, but Midoriya, despite being chatting animatedly with Todoroki, always saved him. 괊𐭏 wailed once again, wanting to be the one to help him. Is this going to be your new reality? She thought because she didn't like her. Even if he had to hide his crush on her for the rest of his life, he was already happy just being friends with Shinsu, and he didn't want to lose him. He left his notes and tuned back into the talk of his friends with a heaviness in his heart. Even if it hurt, he tried to console himself with the fact that his heart would heal one day. Times if someone caught 괊𐭏 in the library with a book open in front of him, he'd probably call a teacher yelling that someone had impersonated the loud Slytherin. Therefore, to avoid all kinds of dramatic scenes, he hid in the farthest corner and dedicated himself to studying in silence. If he was honest, he wasn't being of any help. His attention kept diverting to every little sound he heard, and his thoughts continued to wander to other things. A laugh escaped him as he remembered how the Gryffindor boys who tried to cheat the cup were sent flying through the air when they entered their names. It was fun, although discouraging for all the minors who wanted to participate. 괊𐭏 believed that they were really going to make it. Ah, shit, where did I stay? She said to herself, returning to reality. His gaze ran through the entire paragraph to the beginning to begin reading it again. That was the 10th time, and he doubted it would be the last. You'd think being so far away would make a study session more fruitful, but you've been on that page for the last 20 minutes, and it's the same one you opened the book on. The voice, admittedly unfamiliar, scared 괊𐭏 to the bone. The blonde raised the book to defend himself, but stopped when the sight of strands of purple hair confused his vision. He had to blink a few times to get out of his confusion and was disappointed that the person wasn't Shinsu. A dumbstruck student, he could tell by the uniform, was standing against a shelf with a book in hand. Ah, have you been watching me for 20 minutes? Anyone would think how creepy that sounded, but not 괊𐭏. He had done worse things. Not that he was proud or anything. Hey, you're that guy who scolded the Stolls. After the brothers flew out, a dumbstruck student had made a dramatic entrance talking about the stupidity of young minds and how such a low-level potion would never fool the cup. Then proceeded to take out a paper with his name on it, one of his sleeves, threw it into the cup and turned to return the same way he came in. It wasn't a scolding, but it felt like one. The boy coughed, apparently embarrassed by the first accusation. I was looking for a quiet place to read and you were the only one available. I was waiting for you to leave, that's all. He defended himself, even if 괊𐭏 didn't ask for it. And I have no idea who the Stolls are. Ah, sorry, you can sit if you like. He made a space on the bench to leave a place and looked back at the book. The guys who flew away, the ones who tried to put their name in the cup, he reminded him. Amusement seeped into his tone and he began to read the same paragraph again. He was tempted to leave the study, but if they took points again to his house for not answering the teacher's questions, they were going to annihilate him in the bedroom. It was bad enough that only Bakugo had managed to decrease more points than they had gained. The stranger hesitated before finally walking to the empty spot, the blonde taking the opportunity to give him a proper look. He felt a little silly confusing him with Shinsu. The only thing they shared was hair color, because even his hairstyle was different. It seemed a little longer and less fluffy. The rest of him was all rough and rigid. He reminded her of those uniformed men Siro pointed out to her when they went to a festival in the Muggle world. Soldiers, he called them. I'm Kaminari, he said as an afterthought. Hey, 괊𐭏 Kaminari. The boy looked at him with clear annoyance. He was already starting his reading, so perhaps he didn't like being interrupted. At least the Slytherin hoped it was that and not his last name. 괊𐭏 didn't take his eyes off and tilted his head slightly to show that he was waiting for an answer. Resigned, the other responded. Shishikura Seiji, nice to meet you. I also saw that you put your name in the cup. Do you hope to be chosen? If there was one thing 괊𐭏 liked to do, it was meet new people, even if those people didn't seem very willing to meet him in the same way. Shishikura, however, was willing to answer him even if he looked irritated. I gave my name for a reason. I would also like to participate, but only for the anecdote. Hey, that means you're older than me. The book was quickly forgotten. Her body moved naturally to settle in and chat. Shishikura hesitated upon seeing him, her eyes moving between her book and 괊𐭏, which stopped the blonde. Yes, sorry, you wanted to read. Yes, that's why I came, he responded. 괊𐭏 apologized, returning to his initial position to try to resume his reading. The silence lasted a long 10 seconds before it was cut by the sound of a book being closed. I'm in my last year. 괊𐭏 lit up like a candle in the darkness, closed his book a little more tightly than Shishikura and turned to face him again. I'm a 5th year, he offered in return. How was your experience at Hogwarts? I don't know if anyone has given them a real tour, but I know this castle from head to toe, even the hidden places, so if one day you want to see it, I'm the one. Shishikura hummed, weighing the invitation. It's interesting, right? And you can't even imagine everything it hides. In the first year, my friends and I ended up trapped by some devil's Lazarus that were in a place so easily accessible that it seems like a joke, or so Bakugo said. You what? Shishikura was a man of few words, very serious and did not seem to understand jokes well. But at no time did he admonish Denki for how much he talked, or did he get exasperated with the deviations from the topic he made. As the talk began to slow down, Shishikura began to tell his own anecdotes and even described his school at Denki's request. It was exhilarating to be able to talk to new people, learn things outside of a book, and build a relationship with someone so different from himself. Shishikura's remarkably relaxed aura helped a lot, leaving the initial discomfort giving way to a pleasant atmosphere. In the most hidden corner of the library, a new friendship began to brew. The dumbstruck student smiled slightly when he heard Denki's boisterous laughter. He got lost in those golden eyes that shone like gold every time he got excited. His fingers itched to brush the blonde hair and ask if the black lock was something natural or decoration. His interest in his book was replaced by that boy who had 1,001 stories to share. It's time for dinner. Denki jumped up, running his hands through her robe to smooth it. Let's go together. Shishikura nodded, imitating his action of getting up. I'll just return the book. Remembering his, Denki looked at him. Right, I was supposed to study. What is it about? Shishikura grabbed it to read the title. Magical creatures. Is there something that is complicated for you? She asked. There was no judgment in her tone but curiosity. Something like that. Turns out I'm not so good at remembering every tiny thing, and my teacher loves asking questions about the creatures we're meeting. Denki cringed, remembering how the woman was furious when someone couldn't answer about a creature's diet. Abraxan, I was going to review, but it's really hard to concentrate. At some point they had begun their walkout with Shishikura analyzing the book. Is it easier if someone tells you? Denki remembered when Shinsu sat with him to review for his dark arts exam. Listening to him had helped his brain store the information more easily and prevented the headaches he got after reading the same page 20 times. That exam was without a doubt the best he had taken in his 4 years as a student. The professor at the time doubted the veracity of his grade. But since they found no evidence of cheating, they let him pass. Yes, I think so, he finally answered. Shishikura nodded. Then come here tomorrow and ask me whatever you want. The older man left the books on the assigned shelf and turned to Denki, who seemed surprised. Shishikura was too. It was unlike him to so casually offer to teach someone. My mother works with magical creatures and she loves to talk about them. Maybe she can help you with something. All doubt disappeared from the purple-haired man when Denki's face lit up. His hands were taken by the Slytherin, who thanked him again and again. Shishikura feigned annoyance when she broke free of his grip, claiming it was no big deal. She adjusted her glasses and tried to hide her face as she felt heat bloom on her cheeks. Denki didn't seem to notice as he skipped back to the dining room. They both separated at the entrance. No one gave them a second glance except Shishikura's friends, who were interested in seeing their closed partner accompanied by a Hogwarts student. On the other side, Denki sat with a big smile. And now what the hell are you up to? Bakugo asked, slightly suspicious of his friend's sudden happiness. I made a friend. His name is... I'm not interested. Your name. I said I'm not interested. You idiot. That was another normal dinner at the Slytherin table. Times nobody expected this turn of events, although in reality Denki must have imagined that they could not have a quiet year. Now he felt that he should have high expectations for the next one, although this one was already leaving the bar high and was just beginning. The oppressive atmosphere in the Slytherin common room was killing the blonde, but there was nothing he could do. It was suicide to even bring up the subject. Resigned, Denki snuck outside to the astronomy tower, the only place he would find safe enough to relax. The whole disaster happened during dinner. The date to announce the 3 chosen ones had arrived. The excitement and expectation was at its peak. The students arrived even early so they could take their places and look at the teacher's table as if that would make the whole event go faster. When the director entered with a couple of people from the ministry and the teachers from the invited schools, everyone burst into applause. The cup hummed from its place as if it too were eager to vomit out the chosen names. The ministry representative quickly explained how the chosen students would come forward and be taken to a separate room to explain what would come next. He thanked them and finally let the principal do the honors. Denki leaned over his spot, his legs moving uncontrollably until Bakugo smacked his knee to make him stop. He apologized, but it didn't stop him from doing it again. He said it was just all the excitement of him looking to get out. Then find another way. Bastard, you're making me desperate. He growled, and any response he was going to give him was interrupted when the cup lit up with a beautiful blue fire. Everyone held their breath when a small paper was ejected from the inside, swinging in the air until fall into the director's palm. Denki tried to read something, but it was impossible from a distance. The representative of 𝗏𝗏. The director opened the paper, smiling at the name. Melissa Shield. The place erupted in applause from the table designated for 𝗏𝗏 students. A blonde girl stood up with rosy cheeks but a determined look. Her blue dress fluttered with every step she took. It was mesmerizing. Denki applauded her as she walked past her to encourage her, even if he didn't know her. She muttered something to her teacher and then disappeared behind a door, leaving silence behind her. Everyone looked at the cup again with renewed excitement. The great dining room was expectant to know the next name that would come out. The Hogwarts students were the most eager to know which house would have the title of having the champion. Without waiting any longer, the cup was lit again. A new name was expelled from that sky blue fire. In the same way, the director opened the paper with a smile. He seemed very amused by the expectation of everyone in the room. The representative of Dumstrang Denki took a quick glance at Shishikura. He seemed to be quite calm for someone who wanted to be selected. There were no emotions betraying his expression. Shishikura Seiji with a name known. Denki clapped louder, almost standing up from his spot if it weren't for Bakugu's arm that held him in place. Shishikura didn't change her expression, but there was a certain satisfaction in her gaze. When she passed Denki, she didn't look at him, but it wasn't necessary. Not when the only time she seemed about to smile was when she passed him. From Slytherin, Denki quieted his applause as he disappeared and began planning on how to go congratulate him later. And the representative of Hogwarts, the director's voice seemed to be stronger. No one could blame him. The majority of the audience, being from Hogwarts, were the same. They longed to hear the name. The cup shone one last time to reveal the third wizard. Everyone holding their breath. 𝗫𝗼𝗏. The Gryffindor table rose, howling loudly at the mention of their partner. The champion standing with a big smile, his steps somewhat clumsy as he passed between his classmates who extended their hands to him for a high five. Denki felt a little disappointed that he wasn't a Slytherin, but he was also happy. 𝗫𝗼's reputation preceded him as one of the greatest promises that the world of magic could see being born. It was no surprise that he was selected to represent to school. The rest of the Slytherin table snorted as they watched the boy pass by. Choosing 𝗫𝗼 over all the other candidates would make Gryffindor unbearable. Long live the rivalry, Denki thought with amusement. After that moment, the excitement began to calm down after seeing 𝗫𝗼 disappear through the same door as the other two. The director returned to his place to give a few last words of thanks, and the students ignored him in favor of whispering whatever gossip they had about those selected. Denki had truly thought that was it. He was ready to stuff himself with what was still left over from the banquet when, without warning, the cup shone again, drawing surprised gasps. The tension was felt in the atmosphere when the role fell into the hands of a director who was incredulous at what was happening. The teachers seemed equally surprised, some even upset. Denki turned to Bakugu, ready to ask if there was some joke he missed when a name echoed through the dining room. Izuku Midoriya. No need to describe the chaos that exploded, right? Denki exhaled tiredly as he reached the bottom of the tower stairs, his ears still ringing with curses from Bakugu and almost the entire Slytherin table. He heard a noise and stopped, thinking there was someone there first. He was ready to apologize when the only thing that appeared in his field of vision was a small cat. "Oh, hello little one, what are you doing here alone?" He walked up to the animal, bending down to caress it. The cat looked at him the entire time but didn't move. When his fingers brushed her fur, he closed his eyes and let himself be pampered. Denki smiled, adorable, making a place for himself. He sat down, crossing his legs, something that the animal took advantage of to move from the ground to him. Denki continued to pet him adoringly. He couldn't deny that he loved cats, even if some didn't seem to have the same appreciation for him. Today was a horrible day. It's a relief that it's just you here. It would be terrible to have to go down the stairs again just to not bother someone. There was a bit of a lie in his words. Denki wished there was a specific person. Well, not everything was bad. Seiji let me have some notes from his mother about Kneasel's care. The cat stretched out one of his paws, exposing his claws and digging them into his leg. Denki hissed. "Oh, that hurts, friend." The feline let out a small meow, retracting its claws from him. Anyway, the real problem was the night. Denki thought about what would await him in the morning. Not only was there the fact that Midoriya was not in the allowed age range, but the mere name Midoriya was already a bad sign. The boy who in his first year fought with a teacher who turned out to be an infiltrated Death Eater looking for the Philosopher's Stone for his master. The boy who in his second year ended up discovering the Chamber of Secrets and killing a basilisk. The same one as in his third and fourth year he was one step away from the grave because of Kaminari Kaori. The same one who had a strange and horrible rivalry with Bakugu. Bakugu was furious. "I've never seen him like that, you know. And he's my roommate. How am I supposed to sleep there with him looking like a volcano about to explode? It looks like he's going to murder someone at night. Do you know who he will be?" The cat responded with a short meow, boring but which the young man interpreted as interest. "Me. I wish Kirishima was with us. He would know how to calm Bakugu." He grimaced, remembering the poor utensils that were destroyed after the announcement of a fourth participant. The house elves seemed terrified when they saw them. I don't even want to know how we'll do tomorrow. Bakugo has this kind of strange rivalry with Midoriya. It's bad enough every day, now it will be worse. Maybe even more so than that time Midoriya beat him in the dark arts. The cat purred, hitting its face against Denki's hand, demanding affection. The blonde laughed. Yes, I'm sorry. She kept his caresses in time with her breathing, trying to clear her mind. It wasn't working. I wondered how Midoriya is doing. He doesn't seem like the person who would cheat. Maybe it's just the natural bad luck he has. He's had a lot of that these last 4 years. Thinking about them made him shudder. It shouldn't be possible that someone would go through so many dangers at such a young age, but here was living proof of bad luck. It seemed that from birth Midoriya came with the word problems tattooed on his back. Of course her group wasn't far behind, but it was mostly them following Bakugo, who in turn followed Midoriya because he couldn't let the Gryffindor take all the glory. I wondered what Shinsu would think was a sudden idea. Would he distrust Midoriya even though he was his friend, or would he give him the benefit of the doubt while waiting for her version? How unfair, he whispered. The cat opened his eyes, his ears moved slightly, and he tilted his head a little more. Denki wrinkled his nose for a second. What difference did it make to tell a cat his insecurities? It's not like he's going to tell everyone, maybe just his kitty friends. I also want to have a chance to explain myself. His caresses stopped. Those harmful thoughts began to dance in his head, each one darker than the last. It had been 2 weeks now, and Shinsu seemed to avoid any place Denki frequented. It was unreal how difficult it was to find him. Shishikura's company was helpful at times, but he could never completely forget the absence of his friend. The pain in his fingers woke him up. He squealed embarrassingly and retracted his hand towards his chest. Big amethyst eyes looked at him guiltlessly, and Denki felt offended. "You bit me," he accused. The cat responded with a meow, almost seeming to say, "I'm sorry. It's okay. I forgive you only because you are adorable." She looked at his finger where some barely visible bite marks were visible. It wasn't deep, but the painful throbs were there as a reminder. He carefully approached his hand back. When there were no signs of another attack on his person, he went back to caressing it. The feline seemed delighted with the touch, purring again. "I miss Shinsu so much," she whispered as if it were a secret. The purring stopped, but Denki didn't. "He's a friend. He hasn't talked to me in a while. It was my fault." The pit in his stomach returned. "I insulted his best friend. I said horrible words, and he saw a side of me that I never wanted him to know. I guess that drove him away." The last words came out shaky. Just thinking that was what broke his friendship hurt more than he thought. "I don't know how to fix it, and it's killing me." The cat jumped from his spot on his lap so he could bang his head against Denki's side. The blonde smiled as he imagined he was trying to comfort him. "I'm sorry. You were here to rest, and I suddenly interrupted you with my problems." It frustrated her how she had ended up remembering her distance from Shinsu. Her main concern had to be Midoriya and whatever happened, not Shinsu. "Come on, come here. I'm going to pet you again," she encouraged, patting his thighs. The cat seemed to hesitate before jumping back into his lap, settling down, and Denki went back to fussing over him. This time he decided to stay silent. He enjoyed the view that the place gave him, with stars decorating the night sky and the moon shining overhead. At some point tiredness overcame her and she fell asleep in her place. The cat only realized when the caressing stopped. The feline's eyes slid over the blonde's face, analyzing if he had really fallen asleep. Satisfied with the task, he jumped off the other's lap, and halfway there the animal body changed into a human form. Shinsu ran a hand through his hair. He was supposed to get some sleep before returning to his research, but Kaminari's surprise visit had broken any plans. She watched the Slytherin for a long moment, going over what he had said. He knew it was wrong not to stop it and blatantly listen to what was bothering him, but he couldn't help it. He was ashamed of falling so low. "I'm sorry," he whispered, leaning down to brush her hair out of her face. Denki looked so calm, unlike his usual self. Shinsu felt himself blush. His father's words echoed mockingly in his head. As an apology, he picked up the boy and took him back to his bedroom. When Monoma discovered him at the entrance, he gave him that judging look but didn't say anything. Shinsu disappeared from the place in silence, hoping to give that proper apology to an awake Denki next time. Times Denki felt like he was going to die if he had to open another book. During the last few weeks, the homework and lessons had almost tripled. The teachers insisted that with the tests of the 3-wizard tournament drawing the students' attention closer to his classes would decrease, so it was necessary to teach him an entire year's lesson plan in 3 weeks. Being 5th grade, things were much worse. "Please, mercy," he cried miserably, the rest of his friends ignoring him. "I don't think anything else can enter my head." Jiru closed her book to finally pay attention to it. "You're right. At this point I feel like smoke will be coming out of your ears at any moment." Denki nodded despite the complete lack of respect. He slapped his hands in front of his face with his bottom lip sticking out. "Please, let's take a break, I beg you." "We took a break 20 minutes ago. Kaminari," Momo reminded kindly, the only one capable of studying and helping them at the same time. Mina put down her book almost immediately because she was also fed up, but she didn't express it so verbally. She left that to her blonde friend. That's why 𴑵𝑘𝐸 never studies with us, although that's fine, I prefer Momo. Thank you, Ashido. And speaking of 𴑵𝑘𝐸, Shiro put down his notes in favor of joining the conversation. On the other side of the table, Jiru sent an apologetic look to Momo, who was already resigned to continuing with his study session. I heard that he and Midoriya got into a fight, but a real fight, you know, punching. Momo grimaced. Is that why you both missed class? Mainly, they are serving their punishment. It was Aizawa who found them, Denki said. Everyone shuddered collectively. Aizawa's punishments were known to be the worst. Kirishima looks like he will age about 40 years in 2 days. 𴑵𝑘𝐸 is so irritable that not even he can stop all the fights he gets into. This is becoming absurd. If it continues like this, we will have to intervene. Momo frowned at Mina's words. Why haven't they done it? They are friends. I thought they had already tried something. Kirishima, they responded in unison. Shiro chose to explain himself. Since we became friends, Kirishima has called himself 𴑵𝑘𝐸's person. And since he is the one he listens to best, we agreed. We usually let them talk, be alone, and generally let Kirishima calm him down, but it's never been this intense. Kirishima said he could take care of it. He just needed a few days alone, Denki continued, shifting his gaze to the door as if expecting to see a head of red hair enter. It's been a week now and it doesn't seem like it's going to happen anytime soon. Plus, no matter how much Kirishima keeps insisting, this is getting to him. The Gryffindor looked more tired and his bags under his eyes were beginning to rival Shinsu's, which was saying a lot. His usual energy had been absent. He spent more time chasing 𴑵𝑘𝐸 than studying, and no one had ever seen him sit down to eat properly. They were slow to butt in, but only because every time they suggested it, Kirishima immediately refused. A head of purple hair appeared through the door and Denki was startled. Shinsu was with Monoma and a pile of scrolls stacked in his arms. Their eyes met for a second, which was enough time for the Gryffindor to recognize his presence and send him a greeting in form of a movement of the head and a subtle lifting of his lips. Denki returned the gesture a little more effusively, earning a look from his friends. Are you still unable to speak? Denki turned his attention to Mina, who looked somewhat exasperated. While there was a change in Denki and Shinsu's interactions from none to small greetings, they had yet to engage in any conversation. There were smiles, hand waves, nods, but no words. It's not his fault, he defended, because he couldn't spend a moment where he didn't do it. We've been busy with all this. He pointed to his own pile of tasks he had yet to finish. And every time we have the chance to talk, Monoma is with him and I prefer to keep my distance while we are stressed. Jiru nodded in agreement. Pretty smart of you. You surprise me. Kaminari the blonde stuck out his tongue and the girl mocked him. But he is being tired. I don't like this longing and depressed you. Are you worried about me? Denki leaned over, blinking repeatedly. I knew you liked me, Kyoka, in your dreams. Idiot. Jiru hit him in the forehead with one of her scrolls. Denki walked away with a whispered ouch. But really, work out whatever happens between you. Denki lowered his head. He didn't know how to do it, and for now he felt that this minimal exchange between them was enough. I'll try, he lied, bringing the book closer to him again. The rest of the afternoon they made sure to finish most of their work and only stopped when it was time for lunch. Denki stopped at the door to glance at Shinsu, only to find that the boy already saw him. Surprised, he looked away, doubting what happened. When he checked again, Shinsu was already preparing to leave. His feet moved on their own, a flame of courage blooming in his chest beckoning him closer. Could he start with a hello? Maybe he would be more risky and ask for a private meeting later. He took a breath. Kaminari, hurry up. 𴑵𝑘𝐸 and Kirishima are fighting. And he let it out with a curse at the end, turned around and ran away. Times have you ever felt like life hates you? Because Denki certainly felt that since he started studying at Hogwarts. No, much further back, since his mother left them. Now not only was there the situation of not being able to talk to Shinsu, but his two best friends were fighting. Mina, Shiro, Jiru and him had to divide up breakfasts, lunches and dinners so as not to leave anyone alone. Even though 𴑵𝑘𝐸 always yelled at them to fuck off, they persist. Kirishima didn't say it, but he looked grateful when two of them sat with 𝑵𝑘𝐸 at meals. Another task they had was to make sure that Kirishima wasn't the first to apologize. His red-haired friend was so weak for 𝑵𝑘𝐸 that no one doubted that he would be the first to run and apologize for something that wasn't his fault. And that would trigger another fight. 𝑵𝑘𝐸 was proud but not stupid, and it bothered him to hear excuses that made no sense. Why is it so hard to apologize? It's Kirishima. He adores you and I'm sure you love him too, Denki said at one of their dinners. 𝑵𝑘𝐸 gave him that deadly look that made everyone run as far as possible, but he had become immune after so long. Of course, his friend didn't dignify him with any response and he continued stabbing his dinner in silence. One day he'll get tired of waiting for you to take the initiative, 𝑵𝑘𝐸, and that had been. He was banned from meals with 𝑵𝑘𝐸 and received the silent treatment every time they saw each other. Kirishima was miserable, but at least he was returning to his normal skin tone. His dark circles were almost gone and he looked a little healthier than before. However, the rest of him remained distant. Mina was just as frustrated as Denki by the situation and she seemed ready to hit 𝑵𝑘𝐸 if she went one more day without apologizing. currently waiting for the herbology teacher to finish grading their papers. Denki was with Kirishima trying to encourage him to join a friendly Quidditch match against some Durmstrang students. Bakugo stood away from everyone, exuding an aura of death to anyone who would think of approaching. It was then that Midoriya stood up from her place and walked towards Bakugo despite the futile pleas of her tablemate. Everyone held their breath when the Gryffindor stopped in front of the Slytherin. It was like watching a small animal walking towards its death. Denki grabbed Kirishima's arm to stop him from joining the inevitable train wreck that was about to happen. "Let's talk outside, Kkachin. If looks could kill." Midoriya was buried 100 meters underground. Bakugo seemed about to implode right there from just sharing space with the other boy. In the end, they both left in silence and everyone could breathe. Kirishima wondered if it was a good idea to let them go alone. Whatever they do can't be worse than last time. Plus this time there's a teacher 2 steps away. Denki looked back to see his teacher captivated by the reports. He grimaced. "I think they will be fine. And if not," Midoriya said to intervene. Shinsu appeared almost out of nowhere, scaring the 2 boys away. He smiled slightly. "I have learned interesting spells." Denki tightened his grip on Kirishima's arm. If that bothered his friend, he didn't show it. "They will take points from you," he answered, trying not to show the happiness that overwhelmed him at being able to talk even for a second with Shinsu. The Gryffindor let his smile grow. Anyone would think it was creepy. Denki thought it was sexy. "It's not that we care much about losing more points. It won't hurt Bakugo, right?" Kirishima interrupted. Of course he was worried about his friend. Shinsu shrugged. "Not permanently." Kirishima pursed his lips. Luckily, no one was hurt and Shinsu didn't have to demonstrate what exactly the spell he had in mind was, much to the annoyance of Denki, who was very curious. Midoriya returned to the classroom intact. Bakugo, on the other hand, did not return. But the green-haired boy gave them that "go get him or something bad will happen" look, and for the second time Denki had to abandon all hope of talking to Shinsu because of his stupid friend with problems. Of anger, "Hey" was what came to Kirishima's mind when they found him not far from their class. Bakugo looked like a statue. His expression lacked any emotion, and that was scarier than him being upset. They stopped a few steps away and waited for any reaction. It didn't take long. Bakugo barely turned around and looked towards Kirishima. Denki felt so out of place. It was like he was stepping into a scenario that should only belong to his 2 friends. He didn't take long to take the hint. With a smile, he walked away with the assurance that there would be no more disputes. When he returned to the greenhouse, most of them had already left. The teacher was handing out the projects and giving some comments. Denki came over to pick up his without being surprised to receive nothing more than a "good job, Denki." "Thank you," he responded, ready to walk away until a familiar silhouette caught his attention. His throat went dry. His thoughts ran through a million possibilities, all positive. For the first time he was able to see Shinsu without anyone around him. He even seemed to be waiting for something. Jiru's voice echoed in his head, "If you don't try something soon, I swear," and it was motivation enough. She straightened his posture, walked in the direction of the purple-haired man, and when he was a couple of steps away, Monoma stopped him, suddenly appearing in front of him. "I don't approve of you," he said. Denki had to process the words for a few seconds without completely understanding them. "I really hate you and I have no idea what he sees in you. But I swear that if you or your friends ever hurt him, I will not touch my heart to curse them." And with that he turned around, took Shinsu's arm and led him away, leaving Denki alone. "What the fuck?" she murmured, scratching her hair. No matter how much she replayed the conversation, she couldn't understand what she was referring to. Annoyed and confused, he went to find Zero. He needed to vent about how much he hated Monoma. Also about the good news. Times the shelves covered with hundreds of books made Denki dizzy. So many titles with only one thing in common. "Are we looking for something specific about dragons or?" she asked, and her companion, Shishikura, kept pacing back and forth on the same shelf, her eyes darting from book to book, dissatisfied with whatever she wanted to find. He almost reminded Bakugo with the face he was making. Denki was tempted to joke, but the one time Bakugo and Shishikura had met ended in a back and forth of colorful insults Denki had never heard in his life, so he decided to never mention his friend's name versus Durmstrang's and vice versa. "I'm looking up something about dragons. You're here interrupting my study time." There was no real disdain in his words. Denki was already used to Shishikura acting like everyone was a nuisance he had to deal with. "It was fun. After finishing the mountain of homework, I have a lot of free time, and you seemed so focused trying to disintegrate books with your eyes that you caught my attention." Shishikura stumbled and Denki held her arm so she wouldn't fall. "Are you okay?" The other nodded and Denki let him go. "Anyway, why the sudden interest in dragons? A new dark hobby?" The man leaned down to finally take out a book. Opening it to dissect the information, his answer seemed like it would never come. "The first test is about dragons, hey." Shishikura returned the book to its place. "The first test is about dragons," she repeated, slowly as if Denki were a small child. "I'm sure Melissa already knows. Her father is the one who brought them and my teacher made it clear in our last meeting." Denki hummed, that means Midoriya probably doesn't know and neither does Mirio, but he wasn't sure. This is your advantage. Why do you tell me when I take Midoriya? They weren't the closest, but he considered the boy one of his friends. After so many adventures and his mother almost killing him twice, they must have formed a bond, right? Shishikura wrinkled his nose. I don't like advantages like this. Anyway, it will be more interesting if my rivals have an idea of what they are facing. Also, dragons is very vague. It could be anything related to them, and that's why you can't decide on a book. He finished. It was good to understand Shishikura, like discovering a treasure or something like that. Shishikura refused to agree with him. Anyway, Melissa seems to have a weakness for abnormality, a ending that spread throughout the student body to refer to Midoriya. He knew that the green-haired boy didn't mind, but he couldn't help but grimace. So she might as well tell him, not that I care. You still told me, you're sweet. He leaned over to pinch the older man's cheeks, earning a slap in the process. Denki laughed and jumped a couple of times. I'll help you then. My instincts might be useful to you. Without waiting for a response, he went to the next section of the library. Golden eyes trying to concentrate on reading the titles in search of something of interest. Engrossed in his task, he did not notice the person approaching. His body collided with another, his feet stumbled, and he was about to fall if it were not because the other person supported the extra weight quite well. I'm sorry, he hurried. A purple eyebrow arched. The familiar sight of eyes with dark circles greeted him, and Denki felt all his problems evaporate at the mere presence of Shinsu in front of him. It's the first time you look so focused looking for a book. I'm surprised. Denki rolled his eyes at the other's nerve. Falling back into old habits as easy as breathing. Even a guy like me can find the charm of a good book. Like he directed his attention to the first book in front of him and held back his laughter as best he could. The Wonderful World of Runes. You hate runes, Shinsu scoffed. People change, Shinsu, learn that. They both laughed, one more reserved than the other. Denki couldn't believe it took almost 2 months to get a proper conversation. Even the silence that followed wasn't as awkward as he thought. And you, are you also interested in runes? Shinsu took a while to respond, his striking amethyst eyes seeming to admire Denki's face. No, I was just looking for a book that Professor Aizawa ordered me to do. Denki nodded without pointing out the other's mistake. Everyone knew the complicated relationship they had. Aizawa was Shinsu's adoptive father, but if anyone untrustworthy asked, they were just teacher-student. Denki felt a hint of pride being one of the few people who knew the secret. Anything that can help. Shinsu hesitated for a moment and then denied, much to Denki's disappointment. Okay, then I guess he let you. The Gryffindor seemed to want to say something, but he abstained, and Denki returned to his original task. That reminded him of what Shishikura said. He turned to Shinsu to see if he was still there. Hey, Shinsu, are you seeing Midoriya later? It was stupid to ask. Midoriya and Shinsu shared the same room. They would see each other at some point. Yes, because someone told me something about the first test, making sure that no one was around. He leaned towards Shinsu, invading his personal space. The other did not seem bothered. It's not a big deal. Probably something very vague that could mean a lot of things, but that could also work, right? I mean, anything no matter how small could be crucial. Kaminari, he called softly. Denki stopping to see which Shinsu had an amused but loving smile. What is it about? Denki internally groaned. How is this man real? Merlin, give me the strength not to confess. They are dragons. The first test has to do with dragons. Shinsu looked surprised. Are you sure? Absolutely. My source is very reliable. Shinsu seemed to see something over Denki's shoulder. Something that seemed to bother him because of the grimace he made, and the blonde was about to turn around to see what it was, but Shinsu spoke again. Okay, I'll tell him. Okay, thank you. He offered a smile, although Shinsu seemed lost in thought. I'll go. I don't think there's anything useful here. See you later. She took a step back, waiting for something, anything, but it didn't come. Shinsu returned to his search with his back turned. Just be careful. If someone sees them, they might think you are helping the competition. Denki blinked in confusion, but not for long as he turned around. Shishikura was barely hidden between the shelves, his barely concealed gaze still drifting towards them. It's not like that. I'm just making friends, he replied. Would you believe I'm helping the competition? No. Denki felt a pleasant warmth in his chest. Then that's enough for me. Times, then that's enough for me. PFF Mina fell off the couch as she burst into laughter after repeating her friend's words. Didn't you want to confess once and for all? Stop it, Mina. Don't you see that I'm already dying of shame? She used the back of her cloak to cover her face. Just remembering that moment made her heart skip a beat. She didn't even know how he managed to run away so calmly at that moment. Probably because her words weren't processed until she reached the Hufflepuff common room where she was meeting her friends. Everyone seemed surprised when suddenly Denki fell to the ground, pulling his hair, and with his face as red as that time they ran half the castle to escape from a prefect. When he told the whole story, the ridicule did not wait. How can I see his face now? What if he thinks I'm weird? He met you when you stuck Q-tip up your nose because you thought it would be funny. I doubt if he didn't think you were weird then he would now. Maybe he already thinks so and doesn't care. Zero was terrible at cheering. but he never claimed to be good, so Denki didn't bother to complain. Come on, this is a big step. Yeah, now you can skip all the others and go straight to the confession, Mina said, returning to her position on the couch with Jiru's help. I bet she's waiting for him. Kirishima laughed from his spot. You might as well try asking him to the dance. Denki slammed his cloak down, his face lighting up as if he had just received divine enlightenment. You're a genius, Kiri. The Christmas dance was a special event that was organized this year as a way to celebrate the Triwizard tournament and friendship between schools. It had been decided that during the Christmas holidays, any student from the 4th year and up who was interested I could attend the dance, where they would have to go dressed in suits and with a partner. The latter was not necessary, but it felt like an unwritten rule. Some had already begun to make their invitations. There was still a long way to go before the dance, but the excitement of going with someone prevailed in the air. There were even those who were waiting for the invitation of one of the 4 contestant magicians, since they would be the center of attention and would dance a special song. Many of the girls were eager to share such a special moment with a future champion, and the men were almost fighting over who would get Melissa's attention. Denki was thinking about who to invite. Jiru was incredible, not only because she had said that Momo was her partner. It was a good move. It prevented the Ravenclaw girl from having to reject her long line of suitors. Mina seemed like another safe option, but Denki didn't want a safe option. He wanted to try to invite someone special. What if he says no? Well, he says no and that's it. It's not the end of the world. Kaminari, the blonde, pouted at Jiru's words. Anyway, there's that other guy. What's his name? Shishikuma? Mina asked. Shishikura? Absolutely not. Bakugo growled, making an appearance in the conversation for the first time since they arrived. He was next to Kirishima doing who knows what in a notebook, not letting anyone but the redhead see it. Don't even think about going with that idiot. Really, Bakugo, what did he do to you? Bakugo didn't respond and no one asked him again. Anyway, I don't think Seiji wants to. I heard there's a girl he's thinking about going with. Denki fell onto the couch, sinking into the comfort of it. There is still time anyway. Times there was not time. Denki found himself looking at the Pikachu calendar that Siro had given him as a joke last year. It was simple, different rare images of the electric Pokemon in each month. It was adorable, so he kept it. Now the date set for the dance day was 4 days away from the current date, and he still had no idea how to invite Shinsu. The rest of his friends had gotten their own dates. Bakugo and Kirishima would obviously go together. It was still a surprise that Bakugo even attended. Mina had managed to invite a girl from her potions class, and Siro invited her divination classmate. Now Denki was the only one without a date, and his days were ending. Stop being a coward, Kaminari, Jiru scolded. They were looking for a way to make Midoriya breathe underwater for her second test. Everyone decided to help after seeing him try so hard in the first test. Bakugo seemed to have approved enough because he was the one who told him to put the egg underwater when he opened it. How are you a coward, Kaminari? Tsuyu was kind. Denki really liked her, but she was also direct and she didn't need any more of that advice now. Nothing, he responded instead, returning to the table with the rest of the books open. This is giving me a headache. You haven't even read any books. The lyrics alone give me a headache, Tsuyu. The door opened just then. Midoriya entered with Shinsu behind him and, to everyone's surprise, Monoma too. The tension was felt in the atmosphere until Todoroki, oblivious to social signals, broke it. Hello, Izuku, we haven't found anything yet. Midoriya responded with a nervous smile. Yes, I was afraid of that, but Shinsu said that Monoma wants to help. Everyone was surprised and immediately focused on the newcomer. Denki wanted to ask if he suffered a blow to the head. Monoma frowned. I am being forced into this, don't think about anything else. I still hate everyone here. That sounded more like Monoma. Anyway, show them what you have there. It was a relief that Bakugo was busy with other things, because having Monoma judge his incompetence to find something that will help would be a great catalyst for disaster. Denki was tempted to run away, but being able to spend time with Shinsu was worth it. Somehow, after finding something useful in Monoma and Midoriya running away to find more information, the group had chosen to talk about the reason for Denki's sleepless nights, the winter dance. What about you, Shinsu? Anyone special to invite? Mina could pretend to be discreet, but the looks she kept giving Denki were not. However, she thanked him. Being able to hear something, anything, could help. Shinsu quickly dismissed it. I'm not interested in those things. I prefer to stay in my room. Alas, there went their hopes. Some looks of pity were directed at him, but he knew how to ignore them. He fiddled with his fingers under the table, slowly tuning out the conversation. It would look bad if he left now, so he waited until everyone decided to end the meeting. Siro tried to push him to get his attention, and Denki just shook his head. He didn't need to be pampered like a child. He would be fine. When everyone started to leave, Denki made up a quick excuse to go get something in the dining room. No one questioned him, and the only Hufflepuff in the group, Siro, gave him his space to escape along the way. Denki thanked him mentally by sneaking into one of the passageways, his feet moving on their own without any fixed direction. He might as well stay in his room since everyone was leaving. But knowing his friends Mina would come back as soon as she could to cheer him up and bring the rest with her, she didn't want that. She just wanted to be alone. He ended up at the entrance of the castle. The snow covered the stairs and the statues that decorated the place. It was a nice image, one that 𝐷𝐸 decided to admire for longer. Despite his lack of winter clothing, he sat at the door watching the snowflakes fall. He got lost in the landscape and didn't hear when someone arrived until a warm body sat next to him. 𝐷𝐸 looked out of the corner of his eye smiling when he saw 𝐬𝐸. "Hey, I didn't know you also took walks around the castle." 𝐬𝐸 rolled his eyes. "I don't." 𝐷𝐸 cocked his head in curiosity, which the older man satisfied with a response. "I was looking for Yumi." He nodded. 𝐷𝐸 was interested now. He adjusted himself so he could see 𝐬𝐸 better and waited for her to continue with whatever he wanted to say or do. "It's a little late, but I couldn't do it before." Her eyes stopped on 𝐷𝐸's face, and there was a ferocity that he only saw in his test against the dragon. "𝐀𝐦, would you go to the winter dance with me?" Hey, times 𝐷𝐸 never felt uncomfortable with people's attention. It was normal with his last name, and it continued to be with the friends he made. That didn't stop him from feeling some embarrassment as he danced in front of a large number of people around him, with 𝐬𝐸 pretending not to be nervous and listening to 𝐬𝐸 and Midoriya's clumsy apologies to each other every time they stepped on each other's feet. Above all, the most uncomfortable thing was seeing a certain purple-haired Gryffindor in a corner dressed in a beautiful black suit and a grumpy Monoma next to him. 𝐷𝐸 didn't even hide his surprise when they entered, but he knew how to hide that it was because of how beautiful the room was, assuring 𝐬𝐸 that he was only impressed because he couldn't believe that someone would be so creative to remodel the entire dining room. The living room was decorated in white tones simulating an ice castle. They even put a charm that made fake snow fall from the ceiling and disappear when it hit the ground. The music complemented the atmosphere very well, and the arches with white and red flowers caught the eye. All of that wasn't enough to distract 𝐷𝐸 from the fact that Shinsu lied to him. Maybe it was a last-second decision. He tried to convince himself. He chose to ignore it and concentrate on something else, although the only thing that served as a distraction was the incessant murmuring of those present about the lucky couples of the champions and how romantic it must be to have a special dance. 𝐷𝐸 didn't feel that way. He was simply one friend accompanying another. 𝐬𝐸 himself said it. It was even the case with Midoriya and 𝐬𝐸, and that was fine too. "Hey, I guess I'll start preparing myself for the dating rumors," he thought. "I told you he was a damn no," was the first thing Bakugo said when he approached after finishing the dance. 𝐷𝐸 laughed. His friend's face looked like someone about to commit murder. "Yes, that's why I didn't tell you anything. You kept it well, 𝐀𝐦." Mina hit him on the shoulder repeatedly, drawing more laughter from her friend. "Look at you arriving with a champion, it's just sage." 𝐷𝐸 turned to see his partner chatting with his friends who seemed equally elated, pushing him. It was fun except for the main dance part. "Anyway, are we going to dance?" The group of friends screamed and dragged Bakugo to the center of the floor where people were already dancing. Mina and Siro's partners seemed amused by the group's energy. 𝐬𝐸 also approached but kept his distance from Bakugo, claiming that he preferred to stay away from the exploding demon. He was almost a success ignoring Shinsu's existence. His eyes did not scan the room looking for his lover, nor did he fidget waiting to see him appear next to him out of nowhere. He left his brain blank and strutted across the floor with 𝐬𝐸 by the hand. "I had never had fun like this," the champion admitted. His hair was somewhat disheveled for the first time since he met him, and his face was beginning to be covered with a few drops of sweat after dancing for so long. 𝐷𝐸 was happy to be the one to make his night enjoyable. "Well, they don't call me the king of parties for nothing." 𝐬𝐸 snorted. "Does anyone even call you that?" 𝐷𝐸 tapped his forehead twice. "My friend's in here," and then he started laughing with 𝐬𝐸 following him. The music began to slow down. The couples little by little left the room in search of a private place or returning to their rooms to rest. 𝐷𝐸 decided that he should do the same. Although he didn't have any plans for tomorrow, but he did need a good night's rest. He looked for his friends, ready to say goodbye to them for the night, when he felt a light touch on his shoulder, just a shy touch that made him return his attention to his partner. 𝐬𝐸 looked at the ground and then at him. She seemed to have decided something. "𝐀𝐦, I like you." Like that unexpected invitation, 𝐷𝐸 felt the air leave him with surprise. He was incredulous. His face was a poem and the tips of his ears were colored red simply by hearing that sudden confession. "What about you? I know you don't like me that way," 𝐬𝐸 continued. He had that serious expression that he usually wore during tests, leaving a warm feeling in 𝐷𝐸's chest. He wasn't playing around with this. "I'm not stupid, but I felt the need to clarify. I appreciate your friendship. I would love to continue maintaining this contact even at the end of the tournament and continue getting to know you. But I would also like to ask your permission to try something else in the future." His heart was beating so fast, he couldn't even think of an answer. It wasn't the first confession she had, but it was the first one he felt the person was being totally honest with. He was overwhelming. His lips opened and closed. He wanted to say something, anything, but it felt impossible. 𝐍𝐶 seemed to understand that because he stepped back to give her space. You don't have to answer now. I'll wait as long as it takes. Good night, 𝗀𝐾𝐦. 𝐍𝐶 disappeared among the few people left, and 𝗀𝐾𝐦 couldn't move until minutes later, his brain still repeating on loop what his partner had said. Overwhelmed, he turned to flee to the only safe place he knew. The astronomy tower was deserted. Much to his surprise, people didn't seem to consider that quiet and cozy place a good thing for when he needed time alone. He gripped the railing tightly before taking the last few steps to finally let his legs give out as he reached his favorite spot. He let himself fall, his hands finding nothing to hold on to, so he just rested them against the frozen ground. His face was still red, and he knew it because the heat he felt was not diminishing even now. His mind kept conjuring up the memory of 𝐍𝐶's face, and he got upset with himself when his treacherous heart made him wonder if Shinsu would look same at some point. That was it. The reason I was an emotional mess lay in how I wanted to hear those sweet words from someone else's voice. Couldn't it be more pathetic? She lamented his foolish, love-struck heart for not being able to appreciate the feelings another person had so kindly confessed for him. Are you okay? What kind of karma was he paying? He cursed his ancestors and any higher being Zero ever told him about. There was no way that right at that moment the person he least wanted to see was behind him. No, I'm in the middle of a crisis and it's your fault, Shinsu Hitoshi, I wanted to respond, since his brain had not yet completely turned to mush and there was a rational part of himself alive. He chose to swallow that answer and remain silent. He didn't even move to acknowledge Shinsu's presence. He stood still, watching the snow fall softly like rain. He wished that Shinsu was a hallucination caused by the emotional stress he was going through. Of course it wasn't, unfortunately, but Shinsu didn't insist on an answer. Calmly, as was so characteristic of him, he sat to the side, leaving a respectful space between them, although if one leaned far enough his shoulders would touch. 𝗀𝐾𝐦 had to bite his tongue to not initiate contact, no matter how much he wanted it. You said you weren't interested in these things. The words, devoid of any emotion, shook the young man with purple hair. 𝗀𝐾𝐦 rarely showed that kind of expression. Shinsu grimaced. He knew 𝗀𝐾𝐦 was upset, or hurt, either was understandable. And I'm not interested in them, but his Ashi can be a nuisance when he wants to. 𝗀𝐾𝐦 let out a sigh. He could hear Bakugo's voice in his head whispering pathetic at the way that alone was enough for him to finally look at the other and smile. Did he get you the suit? With the atmosphere less heavy, Shinsu allowed himself to smile back. Yeah, he wouldn't shut up about it. He spent a fortune to make it on time. Aizawa scolded him for not asking me, but he didn't do much else either. Despite the stress he suffered, Shinsu didn't seem really upset. He loved his parents, even with all of his quirks. At that moment Shinsu seemed to realize what 𝗀𝐾𝐦 might have thought because his hand rubbed against the back of his neck, something he usually did when he was embarrassed. I hope you don't think I lied. I really wasn't planning on attending. 𝗀𝐾𝐦 bit his lip to control his emotions. Shinsu seemed to care what he thought, and that, in itself, was charming. I thought about it, he admitted, embarrassed. Although I also hoped you had a reason to go to the dance. With interest, Shinsu leaned in a little. Finally their shoulders brushed, a warm air enveloping them both despite the cold winter. Because there was something strange in his voice, like a touch of curiosity and urgency. 𝗀𝐾𝐦 pressed his hands into fists in his lap, his bravery hesitating whether to come out or hide like the coward they always said he was. It would be so easy to say it was because he felt hurt at being lied to, which wasn't entirely false, but not the whole truth. Don't even think about running away now, idiot. Bakugo's threatening voice in his head was a strange motivator. He raised his head towards Shinsu, and at that moment everything stopped mattering. What difference did it make to say it? Was there anything worse than those last few months without Shinsu speaking to him? Because I really wanted to ask you as my date to the dance. There it was, even if it wasn't entirely clear. She trusted that Shinsu understood the feelings behind her words. Her amethyst eyes shone with uncertain emotion. I thought you were planning to come with that guy from the beginning. They seemed to be having fun. 𝗀𝐾𝐦 wondered where he got that he was going with 𝐍𝐶 in the first place and if that made him jealous. Then he scoffed at the last thought because it was unlikely. No, I wanted to ask you, but then you mentioned that you weren't going, and Seiji asked, remembering that moment almost made him blush. 𝐍𝐶's determination must have been enough of a sign for him to think that there was something more behind a date with friends. Also, it was fun, but it would have been better with you. Shinsu tilted his head to the side as if he was waiting for the end of something 𝗀𝐾𝐦 still felt hesitant to say. He wanted to scream. How was he so good at reading it? Because you are the person I like. His mother was a lover of romance and made sure that her only son was also romantic, so 𝗀𝐾𝐦 grew up in love with the idea of falling in love. Her mother was always happy to share all her secrets about how she made her father fall in love with her, and her favorite part was talking about the magic of kisses. She said it was like thousands of butterflies were fluttering in your stomach. Sometimes it felt like watching fires, artificial lights shining in the sky, and others like a breath of fresh air after a stormy day. But above all, he said with his eyes shining, you feel that that moment is everything when you share it with the right person. There is only you and that person. The world ceases to exist even if it is the shortest of kisses. You'll know, __Denki, don't worry. Just make sure you don't let your special someone go when you find them. When Shinsu's cold lips pressed against hers, she didn't feel fireworks, or butterflies, or any fresh air. Just the sweet cherry flavor of the punch in a blank world where only the two of them existed. I thought you hated me, he whispered as soon as the kiss broke, both hands rushing to encircle Shinsu's neck, his icy thumbs tickling against the other's pale skin. Now that the dam had overflowed, it was impossible to stop everything I felt and wanted to say when Monoma happened. I was so afraid of what you would think, and then you ignored me. It hurt so much because I really like Shinsu a lot. My friends said it wasn't worth it, but you're worth everything. I was so happy when you started seeing me again. When you greeted me, when we talked, I wanted to be by your side even if it was just as friends. And Shinsu, I'm really sorry for what I said to Monoma, for my rude behavior, for being such a horrible person, she thought. Shinsu silenced him with a kiss. It was short but just as sweet as the first. I know, I heard you apologize the first time, he confessed. His right hand brushed Denki's bangs away, delaying the touch for a few seconds, letting his fingers get tangled in those blonde locks. I admit I was a little disappointed. I had never seen that side of you, and it made me wonder if there was more I didn't know about. The truth was that after a few minutes and after listening to Satsuna talk about what Monoma had done, that feeling of disappointment had faded, giving way to a strange annoyance with himself. He had known Kaminari since his 3rd year, a ball of infinite energy that illuminated any room he stepped into. They had been something like friends for 2 years, and until now he had never felt worried about not knowing the boy as well as he thought. Why did it bother him that he didn't know everything about Kaminari? Why couldn't his mind stop spinning on that dark and sinister expression on Kaminari that stirred his stomach in a strange way? Why did she want to know everything about Slytherin? Monoma mocked him after Shinsu called him out, saying he was being an idiot and to stop avoiding the truth. He was in love with Kaminari Denki. It was annoying, because it was true, even if he didn't accept it right away. He was in a bad mood for weeks. He thought that ignoring the reason for his discomfort would make his life easier and clarify his doubts. But it wasn't like that, it was worse. Seeing Kaminari from afar so depressed worried him. The extra jobs were not helpful and the sleepless nights became more and more frequent. It wasn't until Hisashi sat him down in his office and forced him to let it all out that he finally felt like himself again. You're in love, Hisashi told him with a softer tone than Monoma used. That's why you want to know him more. You want to love every side of him and you're conflicted about whether you'll manage to do it. But I know you and I know him, you will, Hitoshi. I was stupid and I was also stressed with all the projects, so he apologized to me too. He dropped his hand, ashamed of his past self. Denki, as sweet as he was, whispered that he forgave him. There is also something else to apologize for. But right now, Kaminari, I want you to know that I still like you. Maybe I have liked you for a while. Denki was delighted. Happiness could overflow from every pore of his body at that moment. He leaned in to steal another kiss and another after that. You have no idea how much I dreamed from hearing those words, he confessed. Shinsu rested his forehead against the others. The aroma of Denki's perfume enveloped both of them. You look amazing in that suit too. Bakugo has surprisingly good taste in fashion, Denki said. Who would have imagined it? They both laughed, settling down to admire the view. Leaning against each other, all the stress of the last few months disappeared in the blink of an eye. Won't Monoma kill me at night now that we start dating? Shinsu scoffed. When did we start dating? Denki gasped. Neither of them had asked the important question, so Shinsu was right. Not wanting any more time to pass, she walked away despite the taller's protests. I was joking, she heard him say. No, Shinsu, silence. She placed her finger on the Gryffindor's lips and stared. She wanted to kiss him so much. Let me do this properly. Go ahead, said the purple-haired man, slightly amused. Shinsu Hitoshi, full name even Shinsu Hitoshi. Shinsu laughed and Denki shushed him again with his finger. You want to be my boyfriend? Shinsu grabbed Denki's wrist, using it as leverage to pull him closer. You know the answer to that. Their lips collided again. Denki swore he would never get tired of kissing him. But first I must apologize for the other thing I kept from you, Shinsu said when they separated. Her father had warned him that the fewer people who knew the better, but he didn't feel right hiding the secret, especially after using it to hear things Denki probably didn't want to tell him. He moved away to give himself some space. Denki settled on the floor, curious of what he had to say. It wasn't on purpose, and it's not something that many people know either. There are only 3 people and 2 of them are my parents. Shinsu ran his hand through his hair twice until he decided to get up. Denki waited without asking, letting his boyfriend choose when to reveal his shocking secret. And boy was it shocking. A cat jumped at his feet from one second to the next, replacing Shinsu completely. Denki stared into the eyes of the familiar feline until everything fell into place. His cheeks flushed red as he remembered that night, and his hands automatically covered his face. The fact that Shinsu was an animagus wasn't even important. Hey, I'm really sorry, Shinsu whispered. His human form had returned and he was trying to get Denki to look back at him. I promise you that I don't normally listen to other people's conversations. But you were there and I missed you a little. I hate you, Denki screamed, but it wasn't true. Shinsu stopped letting Denki express whatever he wanted, even if he ended up getting hit. How embarrassing. You saw me act like that and you just... If it helps, it wasn't the most embarrassing thing I've seen you do. Denki lowered his hands from his face with an expression of pure embarrassment. It doesn't help at all, Shinsu. They both laughed. It was so easy to return to a comfortable position where her bodies almost seemed to merge. Denki closed his eyes, enjoying the sensation, and Shinsu entertained himself by stroking the black locks in the other's hair. And Monoma won't kill you, I'll take care of it. My knight in shining armor, Denki hummed. I can't say the same about my friends. They are a force of nature that no one can stop, Shinsu snorted. Thank you for trying. Denki raised his head with that beautiful smile that Shinsu fell in love with. You're welcome, honey. Their lips met again and it was all they needed at that moment. Denki was sure that this year couldn't be so bad if he had managed to confess and get a boyfriend. That should be enough to crown the 5th year as the best, smiling between the kiss. He wondered what kind of fuss his friends would make when he told them. Hitoshi took one deep breath, not believing what he was about to do, before he marched into the common room and declared, I need your help. Fuck no. Damn, Bakugo, why are you like that? Let us at least hear him out. Mina's high-pitched voice rang out. Yeah, exactly. Let's give him some manly help. No, I don't care what stupid problems this stupid mindfuck has with stupid dunce-face. Very eloquently said. Zero snickered. Hitoshi could only roll his eyes as he looked at his 4 classmates who sat on the couch, or in Mina's case, laid backward on it. It's not like he wanted to get help, but they were Denki's best friends, and as such there was no one else he could ask for advice. So it had been a no-brainer to send them a message. Denki was back at home for the weekend. Some important family business, or as Denki had liked to call it, a very boring family trip my parents insisted on going. I'd rather stay here with you, Hitoshi, please, please, please. As it was, it had been the perfect time to talk about plans. Denki and I don't have problems, thank you very much. Hitoshi huffed, crossed his arms in front of him, and sank into an armchair across from the couch. Then why did you want our help, if not for Kami? Well, it does involve Denki, Hitoshi answered Mina, mulling his next words over. I just don't know how to confess. He was met with 4 very unimpressed stares. Aren't you two already together? Zero asked, raising his brows. Yes, I mean, no. That's the thing. Hitoshi groaned. We've been dating for almost 2 months now and it's been great. Awesome actually. And I want to ask him if he wants to be my boyfriend, like officially now. But Denki loves dramatic and romantic gestures, so I want to make it special. I can't just ask him like that, you know? No, this is ridiculous. Goodbye, get your fucking act together and just ask, what the fuck? This is why you wanted to talk. Bakugo just looked at him as if he was completely out of his mind. And maybe he was, but Hitoshi wanted it to be perfect. He knew Denki would love to make a big deal out of it. It had to be special. Hitoshi was sure that Denki would want to make it official. They basically already were. They just never talked about it after starting dating, so now Hitoshi had to make it work out somehow. Without further ado, Bakugo really just stood up and left the room, explosions crackling around him. Wait, just, don't mind him, Shinsu. We'll help you, Kirishima finally answered after he had exchanged some looks with Mina and Zero that Hitoshi couldn't quite read. Yep, all for our bestie Denki. You came to the right people, Mina cheered, throwing a fist into the air. Yeah, but what exactly did you have planned? You do have some kind of plan, right? Zero tilted his head as he glanced at Hitoshi. He hadn't realized that he had held his breath until now, and he slowly released it, a little smile starting to form on his lips. Just a little bit. I might need some more input though. But for starters, do you know where to get balloons, and also do you like to throw a party? They were just on a break when Denki suddenly slid behind Hitoshi's chair, leaning forwards to hug him from behind, arms thrown around his neck. Hitoshi, Hitoshi just leaned back, happy about the warmth Denki emanated. Wanna go out with me on Friday evening? Just the 2 of us. We could go and grab something nice to eat. If it was any other day. Hitoshi would have immediately said yes. Going out with Denki was always quality time. But he had planned for Friday to be the day he would ask him to be his boyfriend. All the preparations should be done. He couldn't just cancel everything. Subtly, Hitoshi tried to make eye contact with the others, although he was sure that he had a slightly panicked and helpless expression on his face. To his luck, Zero seemed to have heard everything and started to rip some tape out, sticking it to the left side of his table. It's okay forming out from what Hitoshi could make out. Hastily, Hitoshi turned around and smiled widely at Denki, hoping that he was obscuring enough of Denki's view so he wouldn't see the message, because what the fuck, Zero? You couldn't have just done a thumbs up or something. Hitoshi needed to do damage control, and so he leaned closer to Denki's face and said, of course, I'd love to do that. Do you already know where to go? I have heard about some cool and fancy restaurant opening up near our dorms. Yeah, we could check that one out. Hitoshi leaned even closer to him, hoping that Zero would destroy the evidence quickly, but then he noticed was that a blush on Denki's face. Cute. Hitoshi couldn't help but stare at Denki, who didn't move a single centimeter, staring right into Hitoshi's own eyes. A warmth filled Hitoshi as he took in Denki's expression. He really was glad to date him. Denki made it so easy to love him, the way he brightened up everything around him, but shone the brightest himself. He couldn't wait to finally be able to call him his boyfriend. Yeah, let's do that. Friday evening came around, and with it their date. Hitoshi hoped that Zero, Mina, and Kirishima would take care of everything while he was gone. All right, we'll be off. See you later, Denki shouted, before grabbing Hitoshi's hand and pulling him towards the exit. On their way to the restaurant, Denki talked about everything and nothing, making Hitoshi laugh with some of his stories and jokes. Being as bubbly as he was, Hitoshi could well and truly say that he was happy. Even happier when their food got put in front of them, Denki staring wide-eyed at the assortment of food they'd have for the barbecue. Oh my god, this is absolutely amazing, wow. Denki almost moaned as he took a bite of the meat and then held his chopsticks in front of Hitoshi's face. Come on, you have to try this. This food here is heaven. I am in heaven. Let me die right here, right now. Hitoshi couldn't help but laugh at the dramatics of his not-yet boyfriend and leaned further to take a bite of the offered food. An explosion of flavors in his mouth as he chewed, and he couldn't help but close his eyes in bliss for a second. No, Denki absolutely was not overdramatic. The food was just that good. When he opened his eyes again, the first thing he saw was a wide-eyed, excited Denki, grinning widely and asking expectantly, and Hitoshi answered by grabbing his own chopsticks and eating another bite. After chewing, he smiled at Denki. You were right. This place is amazing. Thanks for taking me here. Right, I told you so. Without further ado, Denki also dug into the food, laughing with Hitoshi as they enjoyed the rest of the food. They were on the way back to the dorms, still holding hands with a comfortable silence between them, when Denki suddenly stopped in the middle of the walk. Hey, Hitoshi. Yes? Denki turned to him, a slightly unsure look on his face before he breathed in and asked, Do you want to be my boyfriend? I know we are already dating, and I know we agreed to take it slowly and all, but I think it's been 2 months now. Who am I kidding? Denki laughed high-pitched, scratching the back of his head. There was a slight buzz in the air. Hitoshi had come around to understand it as a habit Denki did whenever he was nervous. Denki would unload a bit of his electricity. Hitoshi wasn't even sure if Denki knew that he did. I know that it has been. It's been exactly 2 months today. So, yeah. Do you want to make it official? The first thing Hitoshi thought was, oh god, no. How did Denki plan to ask him on the same day he was planning to do so? What was he supposed to do now? When he didn't say anything, Denki started to flail his arms around. I mean, don't worry. It's okay, we don't have to. It's fine. I know. No, Hitoshi could hear the hurt tone in Denki's voice. Oh god, he fucked up. No, it's not okay like that. Yes it is. Hitoshi almost stumbled upon his own words as he tried to explain. What I want to say is yes. Yes, I want to be your boyfriend and I want you to be mine. Absolutely, 1,000,000 times yes. Please, let's make it official. Denki's face slowly morphed into a happy expression again, and his smile turned into a big grin as he threw himself onto Hitoshi to hug him. Don't make me worry like that again. You hear me? I planned this all out to be quiet and cute and to be just the two of us. I know you're not one to want to make it a big thing, but it means a lot to me that you said yes. Boyfriends. Denki had an impossibly bright smile on his face as he tasted the word on his tongue that made Hitoshi smile just as bright. Also, he wanted to make it low-key, just for Hitoshi. Hitoshi almost had to chuckle over the irony of the situation. Had he wanted to make it big and loud, just for Denki. Just don't be surprised when we get home, Hitoshi murmured as he peeled away from the hug and grabbed Denki's hand again. Huh, what did you say? I said let's go home. Hitoshi was not ready for what was about to happen. Denki and he were standing in front of the doors of their dorms, and Hitoshi did not have the time to warn the rest of them that this was going to be quite awkward because Denki and him now officially were together. Well, nothing to be done about that now. Without further ado, he opened the door, and when Denki and him stepped through the hallway to the darkened living room, Denki asked, why are the lights out? Is everyone pop? The moment they turned the corner, a lot of party poppers cracked out. Well, and maybe some explosions were mixed into them. The lights went on and there were his classmates, a lot of balloons in the air, and a white banner unrolled from the ceiling. Congrats, you two lovebirds, Mina screamed out loud, followed by the rest of the class. Denki just stopped, mouth wide open, and Hitoshi scratched the back of his head. Surprise, what is happening? Denki squealed, waving at the crowd and then at the banner, which, wait a minute, wasn't that supposed to say do you want to be boyfriends? Yes, no, wait, we aren't already? Hitoshi asked, pointing at the banner that now very clearly stated congratulations on finally being together. Well, Kirishima began, sorry bro, but Denki asked us, before you did, on how to ask you. So we took matters into our own hands to change it. Yes, but your plan was also really cute, so you can ask him too right now. You might already be together, but who cares? Denki, remember to say yes. Anyway, here are the plushies, Mina screamed, before clicking her fingers at Zero, who somehow produced 2 plushies out of thin air. Denki still seemed like he short-circuited because he was still staring at the decorated room and the banner wide-eyed. He only got out of his trance when Hitoshi kneeled before him on one leg, holding a 𝗀𝗟 and an 𝐴spian plushie in his hands. Both Pokemon that were their favorites had a small necklace around their necks, with matching plastic rings, a purple one for 𝗀𝗟 and a yellow one for 𝐴spian. Kaminari Denki, do you want to be the 𝗀𝗟 to my 𝐴spian? Hitoshi asked, a bright blush on his face, thinking about the cheesiness of the situation and the fact that his friends are all standing around them, snickering and probably filming the entire situation. Denki just squeaked. I'm asking you if you want to be my boyfriend. I told you to say yes, Denki. What are you waiting for? Mina screamed as she laughed brightly, having jumped onto Kirishima's shoulders to film. Yes, I absolutely want to be your boyfriend. Yes, WOOO. Get it, guys? Zero shouted out, laughing about the bright blushes the two of them had on their faces. Hitoshi meanwhile stood up with Denki's help before Denki grabbed onto him and pulled him closer to press his lips against Hitoshi's, effectively making Hitoshi drop the plushies. The others cheered around them, but Hitoshi ignored it as he closed his eyes to enjoy the moment. He could feel Denki beginning to grin into their kiss and murmur, I really didn't expect you to make such a big deal out of this. Hitoshi could only smile and answer, well, I thought you'd like it. Oh, I do. I absolutely do. Denki couldn't stop grinning as he bent down to pick up the plushies. I mean, you even got us these little cuties here. They look just like us. Denki immediately pressed another kiss onto Hitoshi's cheek and then turned around to the others. And also, how did you all came up with this? Well, Kirishima began. After 𝗵𝘃 heard that Shinzu also wanted to ask you to be boyfriends, he told us to make you both plan it on the same day under all circumstances. And the banner change was also his idea. Oh, and most of the decoration was something he threw together, too. You would not believe how much he shouted at us to not get the wrong colors. Hitoshi and Denki immediately turned to Bakugo, who stood a bit to the side, eye twitching as he avoided eye contact. Congrats. Don't fuck this up. Wait, is that concern I hear out of you? Dare I say concern for someone you consider your friends? Hitoshi couldn't help but smirk when some tiny explosions around Bakugo's arms exploded. BAKUBRO. Denki immediately wailed, running towards and jumping on him, completely ignoring the explosions. I didn't know I mean this much to you. Shut up and get out of my face. Hug your stupid boyfriend, will you? Bakugo barked out, trying to shove Denki off of him and absolutely not succeeding in hiding his own blush. When Denki really hopped back to Hitoshi, he might have gotten a few small bruises more, but he had an even brighter smile on his face. Denki really proceeded to hug Hitoshi, who all too easily melted into it when Denki whispered into his ear, I love you. I love you, too. Midoriya was evil incarnate in human form. Don't get him wrong. Todoroki wasn't being hasty in making such a deduction. There was a list of reasons why he wished Midoriya had simply never infiltrated his life. Or at the very least, he wanted him to be mature enough to realize that accepting Izuku's suggestions was the worst decision the half and half could make. It was solely and exclusively Midoriya's fault that 𝗀𝗏 had a cell phone in his hands, and applications such as Twitter, Facebook, WhatsApp were downloaded on it. And now Tinder. Todoroki didn't even know what Tinder was. Izuku had said it was a social chat app, but he hadn't really explained what that little white fire consisted of on a pink, orange, and yellow gradient background. Being the denial that he was with technology, 𝗀𝗏 came to the conclusion that it was an app to make new friends or chat with his friends who already had an account there. After all, that's what all cell phone apps in the current century are for, or at least that's what Todoroki could think. Midoriya had disappeared. He hadn't responded to the messages sent to him via WhatsApp, Facebook, or Twitter for almost 2 hours. Why had she insisted so much on Todoroki to download such apps if she didn't even use them for communication? 𝗀𝗏 could very well wait until the green-haired boy decided to go online and ask how he used the White Fire app. But he didn't know when that could happen, and he had to admit that he was curious about what the social network was like. He had just downloaded it on his cell phone. On a Sunday, at 11 in the morning, Todoroki had nothing better to do, and within a few hours he would surrender to a state of boredom. He felt like he would regret it, but he opened the Tinder app anyway. He connected with Facebook, as it seemed more practical than trying to create a new account. The biggest difficulty was trying to remember his email and password. He made the wrong combination twice until he finally got it right, avoiding having to get up from his bed in search of a small notebook that he used to write down what he thought he would forget. Among what could be found in the notebook, there was a whole list of passwords and emails. Midoriya told him to always use the same password because that would be easier. However, Todoroki would not trust these methods as he did not want anyone hacking into his account, even though such an act would probably become insignificant in his life. First, he selected the photos he would use on his profile. He didn't care much and just put the first ones he found in his gallery. There was a part that asked for a description about him, and he just wrote, "My name is Todoroki 𝐀𝐦 𝐍𝐭 𝐖𝐡𝐚 𝐭." The rest of the profile was okay. He took a look at the settings to see if he understood anything about the app and noticed that there was a part that asked the gender of the people he wanted it to show. 𝐀𝐦 marked both men and women. After all, he had both male and female friends and was there to make friends. A photo of some people appeared on the screen. There were some strangers and others who were their friends. He noticed a like and dislike system and came to the conclusion that it worked like Facebook used to like people's profile photos. Todoroki didn't quite understand why counting numbers meant so much to some people, but some of his friends had already arrived on his profile asking to like the photo. As Todoroki imagined that liking other people's photos would be an act of politeness, he simply dragged them to the side while liking everyone he thought had an acceptable profile photo or who was his friend. It didn't take a minute to receive a notification saying you have a new match. It was one of the photos he had liked of a person he didn't know. He ignored it. Maybe that meant that the person had liked his photo back. Something like Twitter, that when you follow someone, they usually return the favor by following you back. Todoroki didn't really understand how social media worked nowadays. 10 minutes passed and Todoroki had accumulated almost 20 matches. Some people sent him messages saying how hot he was, or something like that. 𝐀𝐦 responded to them all politely and strangely because he didn't know anyone there. Until he passed by a photo of Bakugo Katsuki and his eyes widened. The blonde was delightful in that photo, the kind that made Todoroki show an interest in him even though it wasn't like him. He didn't have a shirt in the photo, showing off all his muscles along with that expression that would make any girl squeal as if they were looking at a Justin Bieber nude. Even though he thought it was too vulgar to use as a profile photo, Todoroki didn't hesitate to slide the image to the side, after a long time admiring it. And again the message "you have a new match" appeared, along with a photo of Todoroki on one side of the screen and one of Bakugo on the other side. It didn't take long for a notification of a new message to appear. Todoroki, curious about what he would find, opened the chat, finding a quickly typed message from Bakugo. "Bakugo, eat my ass." Todoroki typed a response right away as he tried to reason what was said. His answer was based on 3 points. 𝐀𝐦 blinked his eyes a few times, looking at the cell phone chat in astonishment. What exactly did Bakugo mean by that? Was it a new form of communication between young people that he didn't know or know about? I mean, he really felt like he was in the last century when it came to slang or expressions, and so what Bakugo had said could very well mean hello. Yes, possibly that was it. And so he would respond politely. "Todoroki, good morning." He ignored the countless messages that other people sent. He knew he was popular and that there were a lot of girls and boys wanting to talk to him. But he didn't enjoy social interactions that much, and so he would ignore them until he got bored and decided to respond. "Bakugo, what the fuck? Bakugo, I want you to fuck me, not send me good morning like I'm part of a stupid WhatsApp family group." Todoroki unfortunately knew the reputation of these groups, and had also witnessed one created by 𝗫𝐻 and who, ironically, only had as part of the family. He didn't know who had given his father a modern cell phone, much less taught 𝗫𝐻 how to use WhatsApp, but he would like to know so he could freeze that person until he could never use an electrical device again. 𝗫𝐻 always sent good morning messages involving fire or his own individuality. When it was the first day of the month, Todoroki tried his best to avoid using his cell phone so as not to see the references that his father made with the word first. "Todoroki, excuse me. I mean, he had actually read it right. Had Bakugo said he wanted Todoroki to fuck him? Oh, if that were the case. Well, it was something very vulgar, especially to be sent by messages like that. Although it's not like other people's messages were very different. He started to get thoughtful. There was something wrong and he hadn't figured out what it was. "Todoroki, please, could you tell me why you said that in our conversation?" While waiting for a message from Bakugo, he decided to look at the other conversations. She could have been surprised, but she wasn't slow enough not to deduce that something was wrong. The messages all involved profanity with insinuations of indecency. "Fuck me, yummy," or even "what do I need to do to get a picture of your dick?" And there were even boys saying things like that. He noticed that in a conversation a girl had sent several messages saying hi and that he was ignoring them in time. He scrolled down the conversation until he saw a photo of a pair of completely naked breasts, and the girl's face consistent with the profile photo, along with a message was written saying, "Now will you pay attention to me?" Todoroki could ignore the image, but he just took out his cell phone and typed a response without wanting to sound offensive. "Todoroki, no." He noticed that a message had finally arrived from Bakugo. He did not hesitate to open it, again ignoring the dozens of messages from people who were sexually interested in the same thing. "Bakugo, damn, I want you to have sex with me. You know, sex, sticking your dick up someone else's ass. That thing people used to do to procreate, but now they just do it because it's fucking good and nobody wants to have a fucking kid. 𝐷𝗌𝐿. Like, I hate you because you're insufferable, just like the people in our class when we studied together. But then I look at his photo and say, damn, he's so hot. So yes, I like you. 𝐷𝗌𝐿. I just want you to fuck me. Is it so difficult to understand? 𝐲𝗏 was still looking at his cell phone screen strangely. 𝗃𴗏. Actually, yes it is. This app must make people weird. 𝐷𝗌𝐿. Of course, you're on an app that people used to fuck. It was as if I had finally discovered the X to an issue that I had been trying to resolve for a long time. He felt extremely stupid for not realizing this before, but he was too naive about the internet and its technologies, so the idea that people used an app just to plan sexual relations. 𝗃𴗏. Oh, 𝗃𴗏. Now everything makes more sense. 𝐲𝗏 looked at the clock and saw that it was almost noon and he hadn't even eaten lunch. He got up from the bed and left his cell phone aside. He was going to have lunch and 𝐜𝐴𝑦 had to wait until he got back, even though he imagined that the blonde's reaction would be less than pleasant. In fact, he would be hoping with this as it would be fun. He spent about half an hour to pack a quick lunch and eat it, then wash the dishes and go back to his room and get his cell phone. She ignored the dozens of new combinations and realized that he should stop liking people's photos. That didn't seem to generate good results. He navigated through the conversations of several hi or someone trying to make conversation until he found the chat he had with 𝐷𝗌𝐿. He ignored his various messages, desperate for attention, trying to send as many messages as if that would get 𝗃𴗏's attention and also cursing him for not responding quickly. 𝗃𴗏. I was having lunch, I apologize. It didn't take long for a sign to appear indicating that 𝐷𝗌𝐿 was typing. It was probably a message saying how pissed he was about being left in a vacuum. 𝐷𝗌𝐿. Hey Pave. The guys and I were arguing about the color of the hair on your sack, whether it's half red and half white too. So, what are they like? It was strange to imagine being the protagonist of a conversation about this. However, it wasn't the first time someone had questioned him about it. He tried to find the most delicate way to answer the question. 𝗃𴗏. Actually about that. 𝐷𝗌𝐿. Photo, I want a photo. 𝐷𝗌𝐿. I won't believe what you say until I have a photo confirming it. 𝗃𴗏 sighed. He imagined that attitude coming from 𝐷𝗌𝐿. Before he could type something talking about it, it seemed like his sluggishness had finally stopped and he understood 𝐜𝐴𝑦's real intentions. 𝗵𝗏 had mentioned this to him once too, about a common practice on an app called Snapchat. Oh, no, wait, that's right, Snapchat, from what 𝗃𴗏 remembered. And returning to the subject, Izuku said that some people like to send naked photos to others. 𝗃𴗏. They call it nude, right? And do you want one of mine? 𝐷𝗌𝐿. I know you won't send it, but it wouldn't hurt to try. 𝗃𴗏. Well, I have no reason to deny it. 𝐷𝗌𝐿. Half and half, don't tell me. 𝐲𝗏 adjusted himself better on the bed and unzipped his pants until he was able to lower them and take his penis out of his underwear. He didn't spend much time because he knew that 𝐜𝐴𝑦 would be irritated by the delay. He just held the member and with the other hand took a photo, hoping that the resolution was good. He sent the photo to 𝐜𝐴𝑦 and waited for a response while he got dressed. 𝐷𝗌𝐿. Fuck. 𝐷𝗌𝐿. Holy fuck, you knew me down on all four in a hotel tub. 𝐷𝗌𝐿. I know I already said this, but eat my ass. 𝐷𝗌𝐿. Okay, I'm fine now. 𝗃𴗏. Were you able to answer your question about hair? 𝐷𝗌𝐿. Holy shit, 𝗃𴗏. He allowed himself to smile. The conversation was a little funny and seeing 𝐜𝐴𝑦 having a reaction like that was something very different from normal. It could be defined as fun. 𝐷𝗌𝐿. I could return the nude, but I'd prefer you to see it live. And then he sent the symbols, which, according to Izuku, were emoticons. 𝗃𴗏 turned his face a little to understand their meaning and realized it was a winking face. How interesting. 𝗃𝗏. I'd love to see it. I imagined that his response must have left 𝐜𝐴𝑦 somewhat surprised. But don't get him wrong, it's not like 𝗃𴗏 wasn't interested in 𝐷𝗌𝐿. If he hadn't, he wouldn't have sent the nude in the first place, even if the blonde thought it was just the boy's stupidity. 𝐷𝗌𝐿. Hey, half and half. 𝐷𝗌𝐿. Do you want to fuck me? 𝗃𴗏 found it impressive how direct 𝐷𝗌𝐿 could be most of the time. He started typing a reply. He was someone who could simply write such a direct sentence without sounding extremely cold. However, he didn't want to seem rude to 𝐜𝐴𝑦. He would like to expose his feelings to the boy as much as possible and not leave any gaps about his interests. Well, actually I've been thinking about it for a long time. It's nothing, so 𝐷𝗌𝐿. Just answer yes or no, disgrace. He sighed, possibly realizing that the typing symbol had been appearing for some time and would be writing a giant text. Or as 𝗵𝗏 had said that internet users used to say, a textile. 𝗃𴗏. Yes. 𝐲𝗏 smiled contentedly at the screen, little knowing that the various matches would result in a headache in the future. However, at least that conversation would result in something pleasant, even if he still didn't know for sure if 𝐜𝐴𝑦 was actually serious. He even arranged a place and time to meet with 𝐷𝗌𝐿. who had sent a message full of conviction saying it's going to happen, and an emoji was that what he called it. If a moon. Todoroki didn't understand. Why a moon? Then he would question Midoriya about it. Just as he was about to put his cell phone away, he received another message from Bakugo. Bakugo, okay, I guess I'm still unsure about the damn colors. Can you send me another photo? He sighed, knowing he wasn't capable of denying it. Our desires are no longer anyone's, but don't blame yourself today. Words imprison me. But when you see in my nights the echo of the traffic light, then you will go without rest hunting ghosts that wander with me. Semaphore, Requin chagrin. The night was cold, and the fog was becoming more and more intense. However, that traffic light kept turning on, shouting the name of that person who was no longer next to him. In his deepest thoughts, he wished that some drunk driver would end his life at that moment. But apparently at 3 in the morning the empty souls also seemed to rest. The question was, why didn't yours do it? The green light flashed quickly again, announcing that a car could move forward, although the reality was that that light was mocking him, and it was not a discreet smile, but she was one of those full of arrogance, knowing what he was doing. Knowing that every time that traffic light turned on one of its lights, he would shamelessly shout the name of that boy who had left him with nothing. Because there, lying on the cold concrete of that empty street, while those insipid lights flickered, the memories became more intense, and of course each one more painful than the other. Where once there was light and bright smiles, now there were small traces of those beautiful moments that tortured him completely. Where the boy with the bright smile and sunny aura had left, taking with him every dream and hope that Hitoshi had ever had. In the distance he could hear how a storm was forming. One of those that announced that autumn was already in all its splendor. One where I already knew that he would not return. Denki Kaminari had been a ray of light in the morning. One of those that leaves you blinded for a long time, where all that brightness fills you completely and you feel that nothing is missing. Meanwhile, he was the complete opposite, someone full of darkness and mystery. It was like seeing the perfect portrait of the sun and the moon. Only perhaps this portrait was not so striking among so many other eclipses formed within that world called life. But Hitoshi didn't care. He was content very well with the little he had been able to obtain from that sun that once illuminated his path. The air hit her pale cheeks harshly as she drove to that beach where she had lost him. Sometimes he liked being able to feel that he was alive and that nothing that had happened had been true. But the reality was harsher, and he knew it when he saw that traffic light that with each change of light blatantly shouted the name of his loved one. Hitoshi knew better than to blame anyone for each of those moments. He knew very well that his desires were no longer his, and that they now belonged to those ghosts that did not let him move forward and that crushed his pride. He drove faster and faster so he could reach his destination, one that he now had to travel alone, and that was like that at first. The memory of how she had known him was becoming deeper and more depressing. Kaminari arrived in spring. However, it managed to be a destructive hurricane in its wake. One of those hurricanes that collapse everything, and that when you are free of them you can start again from scratch, knowing that everything that will come will be better. But Kaminari was not like that. Not only had he been that devastating hurricane, but he had also stayed to be that hope that illuminated Hitoshi's turbulent path. That party where they both really got to know each other and friendship began to form. Where Hitoshi was able to discover that not only did he exist in the universe, but that universes also existed in people. At first he had refused when he saw that Denki Kaminari was one of those who liked to attract attention, but it did not seem like he did it with bad intentions. But he did it so he could feel admired by someone, because in reality it will also work on its own, just like him. Maybe that's why they both coincided like a perfect melody that would never end. Kaminari liked to be admired, and Hitoshi liked to be able to admire him. A sad song returned him to the reality from which he was missing. He had stopped at a traffic light that was obstructing his arrival at his destination. He looked up at the bright red light that told him to stop and respect what she was saying. That traffic light did not seem to want to make fun of him, but on the contrary, it seemed to want to remind him that he would not be fooled by his emotions. Seconds later the light turned green, patiently indicating that he could continue with his destination. And there he decided that he could remember again without being able to feel bad for doing so. After all, he was going to put an end to all that. Spring had passed faster than Hitoshi thought, and with its arrival he was able to learn what love was all about. Because even though Kaminari sounded strange and old-fashioned, in a short time he began to mean more than just a friend. The unexpected visits to her apartment, wanting to watch a movie together, and the mere fact that she also liked cats made Hitoshi a little happy, even in those moments of not talking about anything important other than trivial things. The blonde always managed to get a crooked smile that also filled him with happiness. It wasn't until early summer that things took another direction, a direction that would truly change both of their lives. Hitoshi learned that Kaminari's loneliness was accompanied by cheap alcohol and false fun, and that the blonde had no direction in his life. Where Shinso knew that this was not right and the blonde did not want to understand. The sweet melodies were still maintained, but now with more discreet tones and full of mysteries. "Why did you decide on this apartment, Shin?" 𝐀𝐦 asked while pointing to the light at the traffic light that intersected the street illuminated Shinso's room. It was early morning and neither of them felt like sleeping at that time, and the question that the blonde had asked caught the owner of that room off guard. Well, I really have no idea. Maybe because it was the cheapest, and I try not to pay much attention to the light, he responded simply. 𝐀𝐦 laughed at what Hitoshi mentioned, but he remained a little more thoughtful as he observed that traffic light changing light every 3 minutes. You know, Shin, I think each light represents something important, the blonde whispered, making the older man smile because of how logical that was. I already know what each light represents, Denki. That can be seen in the traffic regulations. That's not what I meant, Shin, the blonde laughed again, settling better at his side. Hitoshi welcomed him. He really loved it when he made that simple gesture, providing warmth to his cold body. So what did you mean? He asked, confused. Let's just look at the lights and I'll explain it to you, okay? The blonde murmured, looking at him and caressing his cheek. Shinso accepted, anxious and confused at the same time. Minutes after the traffic light ended one of its rounds, it began its routine again, and that was where 𝐀𝐦 took the opportunity to explain. Each color has a meaning that could not only serve us for traffic rules, but also to coordinate our lives. Hitoshi paid attention to that conversation. Red means that there comes a time when we must stop and think. Well, the path we want to take, knowing that we have only a few moments to make that choice. 𝐀𝐦 sighed and waited patiently for the traffic light to turn green so he could begin to explain. Green means being able to continue with life knowing that you have made a good decision and that your actions will be appropriate. But it is also to prevent and meditate if the sign is appropriate for the path you have decided to follow. And the yellow one? Hitoshi questioned, a little amazed at what the blonde was saying. The yellow is the one that tells us that when making those decisions we must be cautious to be able to continue with either the red or the green light, the one that tells us if what we are doing is right or we should stop. A silence formed as he finished saying that. Another sigh left the blonde's mouth, but it was one full of melancholy and emptiness. Sometimes I feel like I have only stayed on the yellow light, and that the red light will probably be the next one I get. Apparently the green light is not made for me. After this, a silence dominated the room. Shinso understood very well what the blonde said. He tried to speak, but something stopped him. Maybe it was the heavy tears that slowly ran down 𝐀𝐦's cheeks. The taller man let out a sigh and hugged him, giving him that cold affection that he always showed him when 𝐀𝐦 finished drinking and the crying began. There were times when Hitoshi didn't understand those changes in his beloved, but maybe he shouldn't have insisted too much to know. And it filled him with sadness to know it, except that he preferred to keep it quiet so as not to return to routine. 𝐀𝐦 was going through difficult times that he must have been able to understand, although the aforementioned did not want to say them. After a few minutes he managed to hear the heavy breathing of the child who had fallen asleep in his arms. Meanwhile, he had stayed awake a little longer, analyzing the words the blonde had said. First love hurt, and it always would hurt. It didn't matter how much you tried to run away from him and his designs. It would always find you, and in the end it would snatch from you in one way or another what you once came to love madly. And that was what Hitoshi wanted to avoid from the beginning when he had met 𝐀𝐦. But at that moment he didn't want to think about that. He admired her relaxed face and free of any negative thoughts that flooded the blonde's mind. He caressed her hair and finally gave her a small, silent kiss on the corner of her lips, perhaps suspecting that this would be the last one she would have from him. He opened his eyes and looked at the beautiful landscape in front of him, one that she had already seen before only next to 𝐀𝐦. Although this time he was alone in front of the sad sunset that could be seen on that beach. At the end of summer, 𝐀𝐦 had made the decision to leave the city to find himself, and at the same time had hurt Hitoshi's heart. Maybe it's not you, Shin. Maybe it's me who needs to do this. For my own good, the blonde murmured with a dull voice. The sound of the waves made the scene more depressing. We can do it together, Kami. I know I can help you. The blonde denied, starting to cry again. He looked up to meet the taller man's cold eyes. And meanwhile Hitoshi saw how each time those happy eyes lost the joy that he once knew. I have decided to continue this far alone, Shin. And if I continue by your side we will both probably get hurt. Hitoshi still didn't understand. And it seemed he never would. 𝐀𝐦 approached and gave him the last goodbye kiss and then turned around and never returned. The air blew freely on his pale cheeks. He looked at his shoes leaning on the stone and finished rolling up his pants to carefully enter the sea. The water felt cold at first, but the deeper you went it became warmer. She reached into his pocket and pulled out the last of 𝐀𝐦, the shiny chain that the blonde had given him, shone in his hands, trying to take the same path as its owner. Shinso sighed and without further ado let her go, waiting for her to get lost in the depths of the heart of the sea. He went back out to the shore to sit on the sand and continue contemplating what the little story with 𝐀𝐦 once meant to both of them. First love, soulmate, or instant person. What did she care? Although those three endings were correct for what the blonde became in his life. And perhaps it was time for him to also continue with his destiny, just as 𝐀𝐦 had done. He just hoped that winter would come and bring his loved one back and be able to start from scratch. And only then could he silence the echo that the traffic light produced in his memories. For as long as 𝐻𝐻𝐽 can remember, Dad was rarely home. The elder 𝐷𝐻𝐽 kept disappearing somewhere and returning late in the evening. Sometimes with nothing, sometimes with food, and sometimes, very rarely of course, but still, with a new toy for his son. One day he brought him a large dark blue plush cat, which the boy was incredibly happy about and which he happily dragged into his bed, because hugging at least a toy is much better than sleeping all alone. For 𝐻𝐻𝐽, time spent with his dad is golden. Even if he took him with him on some strange things, the essence of which the boy did not remember and simply did not understand, but if his father asked for help with something, he always helped. 𝐻𝐻𝐽 loved his dad very much. Despite his disappearances, he still took care of him. He taught him to fly, told him bedtime stories when he could, called him Little Raven, and sometimes even cooked pancakes for breakfast. For 𝐻𝐻𝐽, flying together with his father is a holiday. Because in the sky the boundaries were erased, problems disappeared, and it was in the sky that he and his father were truly happy. The boy remembers all his flight lessons by heart and wouldn't trade the sky for anything. They say, those born to crawl cannot fly, and 𝐻𝐻𝐽 flies as if for everyone in the sky who were not born at all and sadly crawling somewhere below. If it were his will, he would put everyone on his back and ride under the clouds. If only everyone in this world would know that heaven is real happiness. He shared this happiness of flying with his father, and even 5 minutes of flight for him was a whole life. He memorized them by heart. Every gust of wind and every moral teaching of his father, so that later, when his father left, he would remember and hope that they would definitely rise into the sky together. "I'll be back soon, little crow," the father said before little 𝐻𝐻𝐽 had time to ask where he was going and when he would return. The boy would really like to know where he is going this time and when he will return, because loneliness has always been torment for the little boy. No matter how much 𝐷𝐻𝐽 took care of him, he always left. And at some point 𝐻𝐻𝐽 began to leave the house too, wandering around the area to somehow occupy himself. It was probably wrong that a 5-year-old child walked alone, sometimes even in the dark, but, oddly enough, no one cared. No one cared about the little boy wandering the streets with a searching, lost look. Everyone had their own things to do, their own, perhaps equally small, children at home. They all hurried towards them. To your children. Sometimes 𝐻𝐻𝐽 felt sad about this, because his father was never in a hurry to see him. He sometimes came only a few days later, so 𝐻𝐻𝐽 had to learn to save food and cook. He remembered how his father did it when the opportunity arose. He remembered everything down to the smallest detail, and it was thanks to his powers of observation that he could survive alone for a whole week, and sometimes more. Thanks to his powers of observation and, of course, memories of their flights, the boy clung to them in moments of especially intense sadness, like a saving straw. Sometimes it seemed that he could only draw life energy from them, from the memories of how happy he was. His father was never in a hurry. He walked home. He definitely came there for 𝐻𝐻𝐽's sake, but he just walked, as if leaving a child alone at home was safe and normal, as if he wasn't worried about his son all this time, as if he didn't love him. 𝐷𝐻𝐽 Jr., of course, knows that his dad loves him, but being completely alone, he simply cannot help but doubt. Sometimes the boy went to richer areas and, walking along the clean streets past beautiful houses, imagined that he, too, lived somewhere here, as if this was his alternative life, in which there is always food at home and you don't have to save on it. But dad comes home every evening. His father often read him a fairy tale about the wizard of the Emerald City, and walking along the clean, spit-free sidewalk, 𝐻𝐻𝐽 imagined that he was walking on yellow brick. Dad had not returned for a long time, and 𝐻𝐻𝐽 began to cling to these walks along the yellow brick. He carefully looked into the windows of rich houses to find out what it was like when you are not forced to make ends meet. 𝐻𝐻𝐽 was kindly jealous. 𝐻𝐻𝐽 missed his father. 𝐻𝐻𝐽 didn't want to be at home with his mother. "What are you doing here?" An impudent boy, apparently from this rich area with white hair and clear blue eyes. For some reason, 𝐻𝐻𝐽 remembered this very clearly. "I see you here all the time. Are you a thief?" The boy was about his age, impudent, looks as if he is trying to burn out his soul, and 𝐻𝐻𝐽 even falls into a stupor, but then laughs. "I, thief?" He looks at this kid and smiles. "I'm just walking." "Well, look, otherwise." The boy suddenly became serious and concentrated, and his hands began to glow with bright blue fire. Fire quirk, very rare. 𝐻𝐻𝐽 suddenly thought that this boy with such a quirk would make a cool hero. "I'll burn your wings, understand?" 𝐻𝐻𝐽 just grins and extends his hand. For some reason he wants to make friends with this boy. For some reason he seems quite good. He doesn't care. For some reason it seems that he, perhaps, is also lost, and the two of them are standing at a fork in the yellow brick road. This boy can also become a villain. 𝐻𝐻𝐽 𝐷𝐻𝐽. "Nice to meet you. I'm really just walking. I live nearby." Of course, he's lying about the nearby place. "We can walk together." The fire disappears from the other person's hands and the boy shakes his hand tightly, and his palms are warm, hot. "Toya, He grins. You don't live nearby, why are you lying? Well, okay, we can go for a walk. I still need to train somewhere. 𝐻𝐸 doesn't ask for his last name because since they didn't say it, it's none of his business, but he only knows one hero who has a fire quirk. However, he does not talk about this out loud. Can we train together? 𝐻𝐸 is amused by the way Toya frowns and how clearly he shows his thorns. But Takami intends to trust him and make Toya trust him. They actually meet and train together. Toya learns to control his fire, and 𝐻𝐸 learns to fly and control his feathers. It turns out he can release them. He is very happy when he realizes this. That's cool, Toya grins. You can become an excellent spy. I want a hero. And I will. Me too. And I will be a better hero than you, because I am stronger. What can you do without wings? 𝐻𝐸 doesn't answer. Toya leaves after saying goodbye and thanking him for the training, and then doesn't return. Father still doesn't come back either. Then the academy happens and 𝐻𝐸 is completely lost. He suddenly misses this boy with blue eyes. He does everything he can to become a hero. He becomes the best in this academy. He became better than he could have imagined as a child. He became the ideal he strived for, but still did not reach the first heroic place. Prospector. Oh, the prospector was an example for him even in childhood, and working with him is a great luxury for Takami. Only now he is not 𝐻𝐸 Takami, but Hawk. Now he has no name. This was explained to him at the beginning, as soon as he got to the academy. A hero's name and no real one. Sometimes Hawk regrets this, but Hawk is loved, but Hawk is praised, but Hawk is a hero who saves lives. Only this heroic work is tiring, and I just want to be 𝐻𝐸 Takami. He doesn't have that opportunity. The Hawk is loved by millions all over Japan, but 𝐻𝐸 Takami was loved only by his missing father, and a boy with blue eyes was friends with 𝐻𝐸 Takami. Hawk has no friends, only colleagues. It may not all be fair, but that's what the rules say. The Hawk adheres to the rules. The League believed him, and for some reason Hawk again remembered the boy from his childhood. That's cool, you can become an excellent spy. Yeah, the spy from Hawk is really great. Only he doesn't notice some details. Only for some reason they communicate with 𝗵𝐵 from the League too often, but for some reason his blue eyes remind him of something. He thinks that Prospector is the same, but the thought that this villain might be that same boy doesn't even occur to him. 𝗵𝐵 is arrogant, although everyone in the League is like that, but it was this Burn one that attracted attention. He was quiet and secretive. Nobody ever knew where he was. He was a mystery, more of a mystery than Shigaraki, Kirigiri, or Compress. For some reason, he gave 𝐻𝐸 a strange feeling. They became friends, as much as possible, given Hawk's mission. They talked on the phone, laughed and walked. 𝗵𝐵's scars didn't scare him. And when Hawk managed to make him laugh, it turned out that he had a charming smile and an infectious laugh. Hawk reminded himself of the mission, but 𝗵𝐵's impudence attracted him, and looking at him Hawk felt something he shouldn't. Hawk seemed to be falling in love, and it was a disaster. It began to spin on its own, and now 𝗵𝐵's lips connected with his, and Hawk found himself pressed against the wall. 𝗵𝐵 learns that Hawkeye not only has cool feathers, but also incredibly sensitive ones. Hawk thinks he could use some sharp feathers, but 𝗵𝐵 is too good a kisser. The Hawk thinks, mission, 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 mission. Then 𝗵𝐵 kisses his neck and Hawk can't think of anything. Hawk thinks that 𝗵𝐵's hands are hot and it's nice. Hawk is not embarrassed by the burnt skin and staples. The Hawk is completely unarmed. The cool spy and number 2 hero couldn't resist some villain who's a great kisser. 𝗵𝐵 presses him harder into the wall, making him moan into another kiss, and then suddenly pulls away, grinning. You're not bad, little bird. He speaks hoarsely and smiles, looks him in the eyes, and then simply leaves, leaving Hawk alone with completely contradictory feelings. The Hawk is hot. Hawk feels hot and embarrassed because he wonders what else 𝗵𝐵 can do. To what state can he bring it? How else can 𝗵𝐵 confuse him, make him suddenly not feel the ground under his feet and at the same time forget about the ability to fly? The Hawk is ashamed and wonders what it would have been like if they had gone further. What would it be like if 𝗵𝐵 fucked him against that wall right now? The Hawk is hot. The Hawk needs to tune into the mission, because then this is the most important thing, because he cannot let the heroes down. He cannot let down the Prospector, whom he was a fan of all his childhood. He cannot let Rumi down. He cannot afford to fuck with the class enemy. Hawk cools down and avoids 𝗵𝐵 for several days. Hawk knows that Day X will come very soon, because the League is preparing a large-scale attack. Hawk focuses on work and does not contact 𝗵𝐵 at all. Hawk communicates more with Twice. Hawk tries not to think that all the villains here are simply lost and misunderstood. Hawk tries to focus on the fact that they are the villains. They killed and made many people suffer. 𝗵𝐵 alone killed at least 20 people, and maybe 30, according to the Hawk. They are all brutal killers here. Hawk tells himself this every day, because becoming a hero with gray morals has never been his task. He's a hero. He shouldn't sympathize with the villains. Hawk kills Twice without remorse. He convinces himself of this. He's a hero. with a capital letter hero, but inside something is twitching and rushing. And there is only one question in my head: how are you different from them if you also started killing? 𝗵𝗊 appears out of nowhere and 𝐀𝐦 is scared and hurt while his red wings burn with blue fire. He is scared and hurt. And it becomes even more painful when 𝗵𝗊 suddenly calls him by his real name, which was left somewhere long ago in childhood along with the blue-eyed boy with white hair with whom they train. Blue Flame, 𝐀𝐦 comes to his senses and realizes everything already in the hospital. Everyone around is talking about Prospector for some reason, and Hawk did not want to know all this. 𝐀𝐦 is no different from villains. None of them are different once they kill an opponent. Twice should have been jailed. Twice should not have been killed. His head hurts from the amount of information when Prospector comes to visit him. Hawk can't look him in the eye and doesn't want to see him because the childhood hero, thanks to whom he got into the academy, suddenly also stands on a par with the villains because it was he who killed that little one. Blue-eyed boy with snow-white hair. He killed Toya. He killed his son with his callousness. Toya could have become a hero and would have been a better hero than his father, but he became 𝗵𝗊. 𝐀𝐦 doesn't talk about it to anyone. His wings grow back painfully and he thinks he deserves it. He thinks he's an idiot for not realizing who 𝗵𝗊 is before. He thinks he's an idiot because even after Toya burned his wings, he remembers how he stroked them with his hot hands. 𝐀𝐦 feels like an idiot because the concept of good and evil is collapsing. Because he feels sorry for Toya, he feels sorry for 𝗵𝗊, who killed 30 people and should be in prison. The whole world turns upside down in one moment. Hawk escapes from hero meetings and searches. Toya said that he could become an excellent spy, but he is a so-so spy. So-so, because Toya turned out to be an excellent spy and conspiracy theorist. Because Toya himself finds him when he needs it, and all that 𝐀𝐦 can say is, "Don't leave, stay this time." 𝗵𝗊 comes up behind him and strokes his grown wings, as if apologizing, although he doesn't deserve forgiveness, but 𝐀𝐦 doesn't deserve forgiveness either. 𝐀𝐦 collects his thoughts, turns around and looks at Toya. White hair suits him better than black hair. "I want to join the league. This time for real. Did you want to become Twice's replacement? Chick. No, please." 𝗵𝗊 laughs hoarsely and kisses his forehead. "Come in, let's sort it out, 𝐀𝐦 Tekami." "I really hope so, Toya Todoroki. Why did you never say who your father was when you were a child?" "Obviously because you adored him. I hated him even then." "Let's go, I say." And 𝐀𝐦 comes, without even doubting it. Even after everything the League has done and everything that has happened, it seems to 𝐀𝐦 that he belongs next to the one who once watched him train and learn to fly, and then deprived him of his wings, but gave him a new look at this rotten heroic world. Toya no longer runs away, disappears and stays, and 𝐀𝐦 begins to live again, with new views and new goals.